The January wind felt like a serrated knife that had been dipped in ice water, scraping again and again at my cheeks and my bare hands. I was standing outside the security door of the condo building, trying for the third time to slide my key into the lock. The cold brass of the key touched the equally cold metal of the lock with a faint click, but no matter what, it wouldn't make that familiar half-turn. This wasn't right. Usually, with just a gentle twist, the door would swing open, and the motion-activated light in the lobby would flicker on, casting a dim but warm glow. But today, this door, the one I had walked through for 10 years, was closed to me. The lock wouldn't budge an inch, as if it were mocking my futile efforts. I pulled back my numb, frozen hand and brought it to my mouth, blowing a puff of hot air into my cupped palms. The white mist vanished instantly into the biting air. I looked up at the sky. It was a dreary gray. It was only a little past 4 in the afternoon, but it already felt like twilight was settling in. A neighbor from downstairs came back from the grocery store, saw me, and paused for a second. He gave a polite nod and a small smile, then beeped the door open with his key fob and slipped inside. The heavy door swung slowly shut in front of me, cutting off the faint warmth from inside and feeling like a gentle thud against my heart. Had they changed the locks? Did Michael, my son, or Jessica, my daughter-in-law, change them? Why didn't anyone tell me? I instinctively reached into my pocket for my old flip phone, thinking I should call my son, but my fingertips just traced the cold buttons, hesitating to press down. Michael had been so busy with work lately, often working late into the night. At this time, he was probably in a meeting or rushing to finish a project. It didn't seem right to bother him over something like this. Jessica, my daughter-in-law's increasingly indifferent face appeared in my mind. Forget it. Asking her probably wouldn't get me anything but a sharp word. Maybe one of them had to change the lock in a hurry and just hadn't had a chance to tell me where the new key was. Maybe the new key was under the doormat or inside the utility box on the wall. Clinging to that sliver of hope, I bent my stiff back and struggled to lift the red doormat, the one with welcome printed on it. It was empty underneath, except for years of accumulated dust. I stood on my tiptoes to reach for the utility box on the wall. The box was shut tight. I couldn't reach it, and I couldn't open it. My hope died. A cold sweat started at the soles of my feet, seeping up through my thick winter pants and into my very bones. I had no choice but to retreat to a sheltered corner of the entryway, leaning against the ice-cold brick wall and trying to curl into a ball. The window in the entryway didn't close properly, and cold drafts whistled through the gap. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself, huddled in the old downcoat I'd had for 5 or 6 years. My late husband, Arthur, had bought it for me, but its warmth had faded over time. Time passed with excruciating slowness, every minute an ordeal in a freezer. I listened to my own unsteady breathing and watched the sky outside the entryway window grow darker. The streetlights in the complex flickered on one by one. Warm light began to glow from the windows of the other condos. I could faintly hear the sounds of cooking, the murmur of a television, the laughter of children. Those sounds, which I usually found noisy, now seemed so distant and luxurious. It had been 10 years. 10 years since Arthur passed away from a sudden heart attack. After he was gone, I moved out of our old 650-square-foot walk-up in the old part of town and came to live with my son and daughter-in-law. I rented out the old place. The rent wasn't much, but I gave every single dollar of it to my son to help with their household expenses. When I first moved in, it was because Michael had pleaded with me. He had said, "Mom, Dad's gone now. We don't feel right with you living all alone. Come stay with us. You can help out with the cooking, look after Caleb, and we can take care of you. It'll be nice, the whole family together." Yes, nice and lively. And for the first few years, it really was. My grandson, Caleb, was just starting elementary school. I would pick him up every day and make all his favorite foods. When my son and daughter-in-law came home from work, a hot meal would be waiting. The house was a lot of work, but seeing Caleb's sweet smile and hearing my son call me Mom made me feel like life had purpose again. It filled some of the emptiness Arthur had left behind. But I don't know when it started. That liveliness began to sour. Caleb started middle school and didn't need me to pick him up anymore. He even started to find me annoying and didn't want to talk to me much. Jessica's career seemed to be taking off. She got a promotion, a raise, but the way she looked at me grew more and more distant. She started complaining that my cooking was too salty, that I didn't clean the house thoroughly enough. She said my frugal habits just didn't fit with their lifestyle. And Michael? He was caught between a rock and a hard place. At first, he would try to mediate when Jessica and I had friction, but later on he grew more and more silent. He came home from work later and later, preferring to sit in his car for a while rather than come upstairs. In this home, without me even realizing it, I had become the extra person. I tried to minimize my presence. I insisted on doing all the housework. I confined my activities to my small room and the kitchen. Whenever they tried to buy me something, I'd always refuse and secretly tuck the money back into their wallets. I always thought that if I just gave a little more and took a little less, I could maintain the surface-level peace of this family. But today, this locked door was like a bucket of ice water poured over my head, waking me up completely. To change the lock without telling me this wasn't an oversight. It was a silent eviction, a cold declaration. You no longer belong here. My feet were completely numb. I had to stomp them lightly on the ground just to feel them. The arthritis in my knees began to ache, a dull throb like fine needles pricking from the inside. I thought of Arthur. If he were still here, he would never let me suffer this kind of humiliation. He was a gentle but decisive man who would have arranged everything perfectly. Thinking of him, my eyes started to burn. I quickly looked up and blinked hard, forcing the stinging sensation back down. I couldn't cry. At my age, crying in the entryway of a building, what a sight that would be. Just when I felt like I was about to freeze solid, I finally heard the familiar click-clack of high heels on the tile floor coming from the stairwell. The sound grew closer. It was Jessica coming home. The motion-activated light flickered on with her footsteps. Jessica's figure appeared around the corner. She was wearing what looked like a very expensive wool coat and carrying several nice shopping bags. Her makeup was perfect, but it couldn't hide the fatigue and the trace of habitual indifference in her eyes. She saw me huddled in the corner and visibly flinched. Then, her brow furrowed almost imperceptibly, and a flash of annoyance, not surprise or apology, crossed her face. "Mom? What are you doing standing out here? Did you forget your key?" she asked as she pulled her own keys from her purse. She unlocked the door with a smooth motion. The new, shiny key glinted coldly under the light. The door opened, and a wave of warm air washed over me, making my frozen body shiver involuntarily. I followed her into the foyer, flexing my stiff fingers and trying to keep my voice steady. "I have my key. The old one. It doesn't work." I looked at her. "Jessica, did you change the lock? Why didn't you tell me?" Jessica placed her shopping bags on the entryway table and bent down to change her shoes without looking up. Her tone was as casual as if she were commenting on the weather. "Oh yeah, I did. Remember we were saying there have been some strangers hanging around the complex? So I called a locksmith and had a more secure one put in. I've had so much on my mind. I guess I forgot to tell you." "Forgot?" Such a major thing. A thing that determined whether I could even get into this house. And she brushed it off with a casual, "I forgot." A heavy feeling settled in my chest. The humiliation and cold that had built up for 2 hours in the wind now surged more acutely in the warmth of the indoors. I watched her change into her slippers and walk straight into the living room. She tossed her expensive coat casually over the back of the sofa, then went to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. The entire time, she didn't look at me again, let alone ask if I was cold or how long I had been waiting. I stood there in the entryway, my shoes still on, the chill from outside still clinging to me like a shroud. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "Jessica, I was waiting outside for over 2 hours. It's so cold out. My old bones." My words were cut short. Jessica came out of the kitchen with her glass of water, leaning against the doorframe of the dining room. She finally looked at me directly. Her gaze was no longer just indifferent. It was filled with an undisguised scrutiny and contempt. She interrupted me, her voice low but piercing like an ice pick. "So you waited. It's not like I did it on purpose. Mom, and I don't mean to be critical, but you're just so stubborn. If the door doesn't open, couldn't you have gone for a walk in the courtyard or found somewhere to sit down?" Standing right at the door like that, if someone saw you, they might think we were abusing you or something. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 2 hours in the freezing wind. I, a 66-year-old woman, and in her telling, it was my fault for being stubborn. A rush of blood went to my head. My face must have been flushed from the cold and my agitation. My voice rose. Jessica, how can you say that? How was I supposed to know you changed the lock? If I had known, do you think I would have just stood there and frozen? Go for a walk where? In this weather, where is an old woman supposed to go? Perhaps my agitation provoked her. The thin layer of civility on Jessica's face shattered completely, revealing the long simmering resentment underneath. She sneered, her eyes scanning me from head to toe, lingering on my old downcoat and my mud-caked winter boots. "All right, Mom, stop shouting," she said, her tone dripping with scorn. "It's not a big deal. Is it really worth all this drama? I think you're just looking for an excuse to be upset. Yes, I changed the lock and didn't tell you. So what? Michael and I bought this condo. We pay the mortgage. If I want to change a lock, do I need to report every little thing to you? You." I was shaking with anger, pointing a finger at her, unable to form a complete sentence. The mortgage? Yes, they paid the down payment, but when they bought the place, Arthur and I gave them $30,000, the bulk of our life savings. We said it was a loan, but in all these years, they never once mentioned paying back a single cent. Besides that, for the 10 years I've lived here, I've given them all my rental income, done all the housework, and raised their son. Even if there's no credit, there's been hard work. How could she speak as if this condo had nothing to do with me? Seeing my state, Jessica seemed to gain momentum. She took 2 steps forward, closing the distance between us. She spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "Mom, there are some things I've been holding back for a long time. Since we're here, let's just get it all out in the open. You always act like you're the mistress of this house. You have to have a say in everything. Every rule has to be your way. But you need to get one thing straight. This is my and Michael's home. You are just an outsider. Outsider." The word was like 2 red-hot nails driven directly into my heart. In an instant, all the blood in my body seemed to freeze. A bone-deep chill spread from the pit of my stomach, 1,000 times colder than when I was waiting outside. I opened my mouth, but my throat felt like it was stuffed with cotton. I couldn't make a sound. I looked at this woman I had lived with for 10 years. Her face was slightly distorted with agitation and the release of her pent-up feelings. She looked like a stranger. 10 years of devotion, 10 years of tolerance, in exchange for being called an outsider. So, all my careful efforts, all my thankless work, in her eyes, it was all just the pathetic posturing of an outsider who was overstaying her welcome. Jessica seemed to realize she had gone too far, but the words were out. She paused, her tone softening slightly, but it still dripped with a condescending pity. "Look, don't think I'm being harsh. It's just the reality of the situation. You can live here peacefully. We provide for you, so just don't make so much trouble. All right, hurry up and change your shoes. What does it look like, just standing there?" With that, she turned away, took her glass of water back to the living room, and switched on the television. It was as if that deeply wounding conversation had been nothing more than an insignificant afternoon breeze. And I just stood there, like a seashell abandoned on the beach, shattered by the massive wave of that word, outsider. My insides felt twisted and bruised. The cold was no longer a physical sensation on my skin. It was radiating from my heart, freezing me from the inside out. The loud laughter of a game show echoed from the television, punctuated by Jessica's occasional chuckles. The sounds seemed to come from another world, blurry and far away. I stood in the entryway, the heat from the vents washing over me, but it did nothing to dispel the ice in my bones. The word outsider echoed in my mind, over and over. Each echo was like a dull knife slowly carving up the memories of the past 10 years. The days I woke up before dawn to make breakfast for the family, the nights I waited up for my son to come home from working late, the times I held my feverish grandson in my arms, frantic with worry, the way I saved every penny I could to help them out. All of it, in that one moment, was casually negated, erased by those 2 words. It turned out that the family I cherished, the love I had given, was, in someone else's eyes, nothing more than an outsider's inappropriate intrusion and disturbance. The sharp pain in my chest slowly went numb, replaced by an unprecedented clarity and calm. A strange strength rose from deep within me, holding up my body that was on the verge of collapsing. I didn't do what I usually did when I felt wronged, cry silently or retreat to my room to sulk. Slowly, I bent down, untied the laces of my stiff, frozen boots, and put on my indoor slippers. My movements were slow but incredibly steady. Then, I straightened my back. Even though my knees were still aching, I tried my best to walk tall. I didn't go to the living room. I didn't even glance at Jessica. I walked straight to the room I had lived in for 10 years. It was more of a converted sunroom than a real room. It was small, just big enough for a bed, a dresser, and a small desk. It was cold in the winter and hot in the summer, but I had never complained. I thought, as long as I have a place to stay and can help my son, it's enough. I closed the door, shutting out the noise from the living room. The room was quiet, except for the sound of the wind whistling outside the window. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the small space. I didn't have many things: a few sets of clothes, some old photographs, and a few keepsakes Arthur had left behind. I could probably pack it all into one suitcase. Yes, pack. The thought appeared in my mind with perfect clarity. It wasn't an act of spite or a momentary impulse. It was a decision that had crystallized after 2 hours in the cold wind and that soul-crushing word, outsider. This was no longer my home. To stay here would be nothing but self-inflicted humiliation, living at the mercy of others' moods. I was 66 years old. I might not have many years left, but I couldn't let them be spent in an environment so devoid of dignity and warmth. I thought of my old apartment, that little 650-square-foot place in the old part of town. It was old, but every inch of it was saturated with the life Arthur and I had shared. After he passed, I followed my son's wishes and moved in with them. The old apartment was rented out to a decent, honest family. The 3-year lease had just ended, and the tenants had moved out last month. Michael had mentioned it in passing, saying that since the apartment was empty, we might as well rent it out again to help with expenses. I didn't object at the time because I thought my place was here. Now, it seemed that fate had left me a way out all along. I took out my old, rarely used flip phone. My finger hesitated over the keypad for a moment. Then I firmly dialed a number stored at the very bottom of my contacts, a number I had never forgotten. The phone rang for a long time before it was answered. A steady, middle-aged male voice, slightly surprised, came on the line. "Hello, Mrs. Miller, is that you? It's been a long time." The caller was a Mr. Peterson, my late husband's most brilliant former student, now a well-known lawyer in the city. When Arthur passed away, he helped me with a lot of the legal paperwork. He had always been very respectful, sending me a text message on holidays. I just didn't want to bother him, so we gradually lost touch. "Mr. Peterson, it's me, Carol," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm so sorry to bother you this late. I have something very important I need to ask you about, concerning my apartment and a will." Mr. Peterson's tone immediately became serious. "Mrs. Miller, please, don't be a stranger. Just call me Daniel. Tell me whatever you need. Your husband was a great mentor to me. Anything you need is my priority." Hearing his sincere words and comparing them to my daughter-in-law's icy cruelty, my nose began to sting again, but I forced it back. This was no time for sentimentality. I explained the situation concisely, without any exaggeration, just stating the facts. My old apartment was currently vacant, my furniture was still there, and most importantly, I mentioned a will that Arthur and I had privately drawn up before he died. I had never told anyone about that will, not even Michael, except for Mr. Peterson. At the time, Arthur had said, "Our children will have their own fortunes, but we need to keep something for ourselves, just in case." I thought he was being overly cautious then, but now I understood how wise he truly was. Mr. Peterson listened quietly. After a moment of silence, he spoke in a clear and confident tone. "Mrs. Miller, please rest assured. First of all, that apartment is your and your husband's joint property. After he passed, his half was inherited by you and your son. but you have absolute control over the disposition of the entire property. You have the full right to decide whether to move back in or to rent it out. Secondly, regarding the will, it is completely legally binding. It clearly states that all assets in both your names, including the apartment and your savings, will be inherited by your son after you pass. However, the will also includes a very important clause retaining your right of residence and an additional condition tied to his duty of care. He explained the terms in detail. According to the will, I could move back into the old apartment at any time, a right protected by law. More importantly, the will stipulated that Michael must fulfill his duty to care for me, ensuring my well-being in my later years. Otherwise, his portion of the inheritance outlined in the will could be judged invalid or partially invalid, depending on the circumstances. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Peterson concluded, if you decide to move back, you are completely within your legal rights. As for what happened today, if you wanted to pursue the matter of them changing the locks and denying you entry, legally speaking, that involves the illegal deprivation of your right of residence. Especially when it involves an elderly person, it can be a serious offense. He paused. Of course, how you wish to proceed is entirely up to you. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, unmoving. Outside, the sky was completely dark. The window reflected my pale but remarkably calm face. The law, rules, rights things I once thought were so distant from my life were now my only armor and my only weapon. It turned out I wasn't a helpless outsider with nothing, at the mercy of others. I still had my own nest, and I had the dignity and protection afforded to me by the law. Just then, I heard the sound of a key turning in the lock outside my door. It was Michael, home from work. Then came Jessica's raised voice, full of feigned grievance. I could vaguely make out words like your mother, making a big deal out of nothing, and giving me the silent treatment. I didn't go out. I didn't do what I normally would have rushed out to see if my son was tired or hungry. I just sat there quietly, listening to the argument that I had caused but which no longer concerned me. After a while, the argument subsided, replaced by the sound of Jessica's sniffling and Michael's low murmurs of comfort. I slowly stood up, walked to the dresser, and opened it. I looked at the few, neatly folded clothes inside. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile formed on my lips. It wasn't a happy smile, nor one of relief. It was the smile of someone who understood everything, who had let go of all illusions and expectations, a smile of cold, hard resolution. Fine. If I'm an outsider, then this outsider won't disturb your family's peace any longer. I began to pack, one item at a time, carefully and slowly. My movements were unhurried, my mind perfectly clear and calm. I knew, from this moment on, I was no longer the submissive, long-suffering old woman. I was going to take back my own life, my house, and my dignity. And all of this was just the beginning. The commotion in the living room gradually died down, leaving only the faint, persistent sound of the television. I could imagine the scene out there. Jessica was probably still dabbing her eyes, while Michael wore a look of exhaustion and helplessness. Caught between his mother and his wife, he had long grown accustomed to using silence and avoidance as his coping mechanisms. Perhaps he even felt that I, his mother, was being unreasonable again, causing him more trouble. If this had been before, upon hearing him return, I would have immediately gone out to ask if he had eaten, if he wanted me to heat up some soup for him, trying to create the illusion that everything was fine, to maintain that superficial harmony. But not tonight. I continued packing in my room. I really didn't have much. A few pieces of clothing I wore often, some personal items, and the small locked wooden box. Inside were my and Arthur's marriage certificate, some old photos, and that all-important will. I wrapped them carefully and placed them in the inner pocket of my suitcase. The suitcase was old, bought many years ago, and its wheels were a bit shaky, but it was more than enough to hold all my worldly possessions. Packing each item felt like making a clean break with the past 10 years. The half-finished sweater I was knitting for Caleb was still in the drawer, the knitting needles resting quietly in the yarn. I picked it up, looked at it for a moment, then gently put it back down. I decided not to take it. My grandson was a teenager now. He no longer needed his grandmother's hand, knit, unfashionable sweaters. Those ties of affection I thought I was weaving were, in reality, fragile enough to snap at the slightest touch. While I was packing, I heard Michael's footsteps approach my door. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he didn't knock. He didn't ask, "Mom, are you okay?" Instead, he turned and walked away. The sound of his retreating footsteps was like the final stone dropping onto the frozen lake of my heart. It didn't create a single ripple, it only made the ice thicker. That was fine. It would make it easier to leave without any lingering attachments. When everything was packed, the suitcase stood in the corner like a soldier ready for deployment. I sat on the edge of the bed, not feeling the least bit sleepy. The night was deep, and the world outside was silent, save for the occasional howl of the wind. I started planning for the next day. First, I needed to call a moving company. I didn't have much. A small van would be enough. Then, I had to go check on the old apartment. I hadn't been back in 10 years. I had no idea what condition it was in. It would need a thorough cleaning. I also had to get the utilities, water, gas, and electricity turned back on. There were a million things to do, but strangely, I didn't feel overwhelmed. Instead, I felt a long-lost sense of control over my own life, a feeling that had nearly vanished during the 10 years I depended on my son. The next day, I was up at the crack of dawn. As usual, I tiptoed into the kitchen and started making breakfast. Oatmeal bubbled on the stove. I fried some eggs and heated up some bagels. This would probably be the last meal I ever made for this family. I wasn't trying to play the victim. I just believed in finishing what I started. This 10-year habit would end with this one last breakfast. Around 7 o'clock, Michael emerged from his bedroom, rubbing his tired eyes. He saw me busy in the kitchen and paused, a complicated expression on his face. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but in the end, just mumbled a mom and sat down to eat. He ate quickly, his mind clearly elsewhere, his eyes darting away, unable to meet mine. Jessica didn't come out for breakfast. She was probably still angry about last night, or perhaps she simply couldn't be bothered to eat food I had prepared. Caleb came out with his backpack on, called out Grandma, grabbed a bagel, and rushed out the door. I watched his youthful, impatient back and sighed softly. The child was innocent, but the chasm between us had already grown too deep. "Michael," I began, my voice calm, as I placed a bowl of oatmeal in front of him. "I've decided to move back to the old apartment." Michael was in the middle of a spoonful of oatmeal. He choked, coughing violently, his face turning red. He looked up at me, stunned, as if he couldn't believe his ears. "Mom, what are you saying? Move back? Why? Is it because of yesterday?" I cut him off, my face still holding that calm, almost distant smile. "It's for no particular reason. The old place is empty anyway, and the tenants just moved out. I was thinking, all the old neighbors are there. It'll be nice to have people to talk to. I'm getting old. It's better to live in a place I'm used to." I deliberately avoided mentioning the locked door or the word outsider, leaving us both a final shred of dignity. I wasn't afraid of them. I just didn't want another pointless argument as I was leaving. My goal was clear: leave, and then, using the rights the law afforded me, take back what was mine. Michael was clearly agitated. He put down his spoon. "Mom, what are you doing? That place is so old, the amenities are outdated. How can we be at ease with you, living there all by yourself? Was it something Jessica said yesterday? You know how she is. Her bark is worse than her bite. Don't take it to heart. I'll talk to her. Her bark is worse than her bite." I repeated the phrase silently to myself, finding it incredibly ironic. The cold lock, the 2 hours waiting in the freezing wind, that soul-crushing word outsider, could those things be erased by such a flimsy excuse? I shook my head, my tone gentle but firm. "It has nothing to do with Jessica. It's my own decision. I've thought it over. You're both busy with work, and Caleb is grown up now. You don't need me to take care of you anymore. If I move back, it'll be quieter and better for all of us." When I said better for all of you, I looked at Michael calmly. His eyes flickered. It seemed my words had hit a nerve. Perhaps, deep down, he had long felt that his mother was a burden, but filial duty prevented him from ever saying it. "But Mom," Michael wanted to say more, but seeing my resolute expression, he was at a loss for words. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Well, the old place hasn't been lived in for ages. It must need a lot of work. How about this? Wait until I have time on the weekend. I'll help you clean up, and then we'll see. No need, I refused, crisply. I've already contacted a moving company. They're coming this morning. I can manage the old place by myself. This morning? Michael was completely stunned. He probably thought I was just talking, or that it would take me at least a week or two to prepare. So soon? Yes, while the weather's still decent, I said lightly, beginning to clear the dishes. You should get to work. Don't be late. Michael sat there, watching me bustle around, his face a mixture of shock, confusion, and a faint, almost imperceptible hint of relief. He didn't protest further, just mumbled, "Well, can you manage on your own? If you need anything, you have to call me." I nodded without turning around. Call him? From now on, I doubted I would be calling him for anything, at least not for help. At 8:30, the moving van arrived on time. The movers came up to get my things. They were efficient. I had very little, just one suitcase and 2 cardboard boxes of miscellaneous items. Throughout the entire process, Jessica never came out of the bedroom. Michael stood in the living room, looking helpless, wanting to help but not knowing how, just repeating, "Mom, be careful with that." I took one last look around this home I had tended to for 10 years. The stovetop in the kitchen, which I had polished until it shone. The plants on the balcony, which I had nurtured until they thrived. Every corner of the living room bore the mark of my cleaning. This place had once been filled with laughter, and it had also consumed countless tears and so much of my hard work. But that was all in the past. I picked up my old tote bag, which held my important documents and my phone. "I'm leaving," I said to Michael. "You two take care." My voice was as calm as if I were commenting on the weather. No accusations, no complaints, no reluctance. This extreme calm seemed to make Michael even more uneasy. He opened his mouth, but only managed to squeeze out, "Mom, travel safe. When you're settled, give me a call." I nodded, said nothing more, and turned to follow the movers out the door. The motion-activated light in the hallway flickered on. Step by step, I walked steadily down the stairs, without looking back. I knew that the moment the door closed behind me, my connection to this home was severed for good. And my own battle, or rather, my own quiet new life was just beginning. Sitting in the passenger seat of the moving van, watching the streetscape fly by in reverse, my heart felt hollowed out, yet filled with something unfamiliar and hard. Goodbye. Or rather, good riddance. The van left the modern subdivision where my son lived, and the scenery outside the window gradually became older and more familiar. We had reached the old part of town. The streets grew narrower, lined with aging sycamore trees whose bare branches pointed toward the gray-white sky. The storefront signs had a last-century feel to them, the grain and oil shop, the shoe repairman, the barber, all faces that had been there for decades. The van stopped at the entrance of a familiar alley. It couldn't go any further in. I got out, my feet landing on the slightly uneven concrete. I took a deep breath of the cold air. It was filled with the unique smell of the old city, a mixture of coal smoke, old furniture, and the scent of daily life. That smell, strangely, calmed my wandering heart. My old apartment was at the end of this alley, on the 4th floor of a 6-story building. There was no elevator. The movers helped me carry my boxes and suitcase to the foot of the stairs, and after I paid them, they left. I looked up at the familiar building. The paint on the exterior was peeling in places, and the windows looked old, but I knew that beneath this worn facade was a space that was entirely mine, a space where no one could evict me. The stairwell was a bit dim, cluttered with some of the neighbors' things, but it was reasonably clean. Step by step, I slowly climbed to the 4th floor. The arthritis in my knees protested, but a certain strength in my heart kept me going. With every step up, I felt one step further from that suffocating house, and one step closer to my own territory. I stood before the security door of apartment 401. The faded good fortune sticker that a tenant had put up years ago was still on the door, now bleached white. I took out the key from my tote bag, a key I hadn't used in 10 years but had always kept safe. It was slightly rusted. I carefully inserted it into the lock, my heart beating a little faster, afraid the lock might be broken too. With a clean click, the bolt retracted smoothly. I gave the door a gentle push, and it swung open. A wave of air, thick with dust, and the musty smell of a long unoccupied space hit my face. I instinctively waved a hand in front of my nose and stepped inside. The apartment was dark. The curtains were drawn tight. I fumbled for the light switch on the wall. The overhead light in the living room flickered a few times before staying on, casting a dim yellow glow. The light illuminated a room full of dust, dancing in the air. The furniture was covered with white dust cloths, and a thick layer of grime coated the floor. Everything was just as the tenants had left it, silent, empty, lifeless. I walked to the window and yanked open the heavy curtains. Dust rained down. The winter sun struggled to pierce through the grimy glass, creating beams of light in which countless dust motes danced. I opened the windows, letting the cold, fresh air circulate and clear out the musty smell. I stood in the middle of the living room, looking around. The sofa, the coffee table, the television stand. Arthur and I had picked them all out together. They were old-fashioned, but sturdy. The cross-stitch I had made was still hanging on the wall, its frame covered in dust. The potted plant in the corner had long since withered, leaving only a tangle of dry vines. Everything here was frozen in time, just as I had left it 10 years ago. Time seemed to have stopped, accumulating a decade's worth of dust. I didn't feel sad or desolate. Instead, I felt a deep sense of homecoming. It was dilapidated and dirty, but every inch of this space belonged to me. I didn't have to walk on eggshells around anyone. I didn't have to worry about someone changing the locks and shutting me out. After a short rest, I rolled up my sleeves and began the massive task of cleaning. It was a huge undertaking, sweeping, mopping, dusting, scrubbing every corner of the kitchen and bathroom. I worked slowly. My stamina wasn't what it used to be. I had to take frequent breaks. The dust made me cough, and the cold water turned my hands red. But I didn't feel tired or miserable. With every stain I scrubbed away, with every clean patch of floor I reclaimed, my heart felt a little lighter. This wasn't just manual labor. It was a ritual, a ceremony to cleanse the gloom of the past 10 years and welcome a new life. I cleaned out the bedroom that Arthur and I had shared, wiped down the bed frame, and made the bed with the linens I had brought with me. The room still smelled a bit stale, but tonight I would finally be able to sleep in my own bed. I worked for most of the day and only managed to get the bedroom and living room into a habitable state. My stomach was growling. I realized I hadn't eaten anything since breakfast. I wasn't sure if the gas stove still worked. I tried turning it on, and with a soft whoosh, a blue flame leaped to life. Thank goodness, it worked. I boiled some water and made myself a cup of instant noodles I'd brought from my son's house. Sitting at the dining table, dusty but now wiped clean, bathed in a ray of sunlight eating that simple meal, I felt a sense of satisfaction and peace I hadn't known in years. In the afternoon, I went to the local community office and the utility company to get my services restored. The woman at the community office was the same one from years ago. She recognized me and greeted me warmly. "Carol, you're back. It's been so long." Her simple greeting was a balm to my soul. Here, I wasn't anyone's burden. I wasn't an outsider. I was just Carol, a familiar face to my old neighbors. That night, I lay in my own familiar bed. The mattress was a bit firm, and the blankets had a faint, musty smell, but my heart was more at peace than it had been in a decade. Outside, the old city was quiet, with only the occasional bark of a dog and the distant hum of traffic. I took out the small wooden box, opened it, and by the dim light of the bedside lamp, I looked at a photo of Arthur and me. He was so young in the picture, his smile so gentle. I gently stroked the photograph and whispered in my heart, "Arthur, I'm home. I'm back in our home. Don't you worry. I'm going to be all right now." I knew the road ahead was long. The apartment needed serious repairs. My life needed to be rebuilt, and the legal matters with my son's family needed to be resolved. But at that moment, I didn't want to think about any of that. I just wanted to savor this hard-won peace that was all my own. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in years. No nightmares, no anxieties. 10 years of living in someone else's house, 2 hours of freezing in the wind, one heartbreaking word outsider, it all seemed to have been swept into a corner for now, along with the dust of the old apartment. This was my fortress. This was my starting point. From tomorrow on, I was going to live again, for myself. The first few days back in my old apartment were filled with a whirlwind of small but necessary tasks. There was the deep cleaning, buying basic household supplies, and calling a handyman to check the aging wiring and pipes. Every day was exhausting, but every day was also fulfilling and real. Under my own two hands, my little nest gradually shed its look of abandonment and began to feel like a home again, filled with the warmth of life. Michael called me on the second night after I moved out. His voice over the phone was tired and held a faint, almost imperceptible note of resentment. "Mom, so you really moved back? Are you settled in? That old place hasn't been lived in for so long. Is it even livable?" he asked. I was trying to tighten a new faucet, cradling the phone between my shoulder and my cheek. I kept my voice as neutral as possible. "Everything is fine. It's mostly cleaned up. You don't need to worry about me." He was silent for a few seconds, then said, "Jessica, what she said the other day was out of line. I apologize on her behalf. Mom, please don't be angry. How about we come over this weekend to see you?" "There's no need," I replied quickly and firmly. "It's a mess over here, nothing to see. You two are busy. I can manage on my own." I wasn't being spiteful. I genuinely didn't want any more involvement with them. A superficial visit and polite chatter wouldn't change the fact that I was an outsider. Why bother acting out the part of a happy family? Besides, I had more important things to do. Michael seemed surprised by my resolute refusal. He paused again, his tone becoming a little meek. "Well, then you take care of yourself. If you need anything, you have to call me." "Okay, I will," I said, then used the leaky faucet as an excuse to hang up. In the following days, he would occasionally send a text message asking if I had eaten or telling me to dress warmly. I always replied with a simple "I ate" or "okay," never adding another word. I could sense his cautiousness and also a degree of relief. Perhaps my departure was a liberation for him as well. At least he no longer had to be caught between Jessica and me. About 3 or 4 days of this quiet life passed. One afternoon, while I was hanging blankets on the balcony to air out, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar local number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello? Is this Mrs. Carol Miller?" A polite male voice, with a professional, almost deferential tone, asked from the other end. "This is she." "Who is calling?" I asked, a little warily. "Hello, Mrs. Miller. Sorry to bother you. My name is Kevin, from Prime Properties Realty." The man introduced himself enthusiastically. "We understand that the property you own at this address is currently vacant. Is that correct?" My heart sank. A realtor. How did they know my apartment was vacant and get my number so directly? I had only been back for a few days. How did news travel so fast? I composed myself and replied coolly, "Yes, it's vacant, but I'm living here myself now. I have no plans to rent or sell." "Oh, Mrs. Miller, please don't be so quick to refuse." The realtor, Kevin, sounded even more eager. "Let me tell you, the location of your apartment is fantastic. It's an older building, but the neighborhood is convenient, and it's in a good school district. These older places are in high demand right now, for both renting and selling. The prices are great. We have clients right now who are looking specifically in this area. How about we set up a time to come by and chat? I guarantee you'll be satisfied with the price." I gripped the phone, my fingers tightening. My intuition told me this wasn't so simple. I asked calmly, "Mr. Kevin, may I ask where you got my contact information and the news that my apartment was vacant?" There was a noticeable pause on the other end, followed by a forced laugh. "Well, Mrs. Miller, you know how it is in our business. We have our ways. It's mainly because your property is so desirable that we've been keeping an eye on it. Was it my son, Michael, or my daughter-in-law, Jessica, who contacted you?" I cut him off, getting straight to the point. Another brief silence. Then his voice became vague and awkward. Well, Mrs. Miller, you see, we're just working for our clients. Since you're living there yourself now, well, never mind then. Sorry to have bothered you, so sorry." Before I could ask another question, he hung up. Listening to the dial tone, I stood on the balcony. The winter sun shone on me, but I felt no warmth. Instead, A chill crept up from the soles of my feet. It was them. Of course, it was them. I had barely moved out, and they were already so eager to get rid of my only shelter. Were they planning to sell it and split the money, or rent it out to supplement their own income? Were they so sure I would just obey their wishes and let them do as they pleased? Or had they completely forgotten or perhaps never known that legally I had the final say over this property? It seemed my quiet departure hadn't made them realize the gravity of the situation. They probably thought I was just an old woman throwing a tantrum, that after a while, when my anger subsided or I couldn't handle living alone, I would come crawling back to be their convenient outsider again. They might even be plotting how to take over this apartment for good. I put down the phone and looked at the neighbors coming and going in the alley below. My heart felt like a block of ice. I had originally thought that, as long as they left me alone, I could keep the will a secret, and we could coexist peacefully. After all, Michael was my son, and I didn't want to be too harsh. But now, they had overstepped. They had gone behind my back to meddle with my home. This was no longer just a family squabble. It had crossed my bottom line, the very foundation of my survival. I went back inside and closed the door, shutting out the world. The room was quiet, except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock. I walked to the small wooden box, opened it, and took out the will, enclosed in a manila envelope. The paper was slightly yellowed, but the writing on it was clear and strong. I traced Arthur's signature, his solemn expression as he signed it years ago flashing before my eyes. He had said, "Carol, in this world, people can be unpredictable. We have to protect ourselves, and we have to set some rules for the children." At the time, I thought he was being too cautious, almost unkind. Only now did I understand that he had seen through the complexities of human nature. I picked up my phone, found Mr. Peterson's number, and dialed it without hesitation. "Daniel, it's me, Carol," I said, my voice exceptionally calm. "I have something that I think I'll need your help with." Mr. Peterson responded immediately. "Mrs. Miller, of course. Tell me what's on your mind." I told him everything about the realtor's call and my suspicions. After listening, Mr. Peterson paused for a moment, his tone becoming serious. "Mrs. Miller, I understand. What they're doing is not only unreasonable, but from a legal standpoint, it could also be considered an infringement on your property and residency rights. Since they've made the first move, we can't wait any longer. Here's what I propose," Mr. Peterson said, his thoughts organized and clear. "First, I will send a formal legal letter to Prime Properties Realty on your behalf, clearly stating that the right to dispose of this property rests solely with you. Any unauthorized contact or attempts to deal with the property are illegal. We will demand that they cease all contact immediately and disclose the source of their information. Second," he paused, his voice growing heavier, regarding the will and the matter of support, "given your son and daughter-in-law's recent actions, especially your daughter-in-law locking you out and verbally abusing you, and now their attempt to dispose of your property, they have seriously violated the spirit of the will regarding their duty of care and the protection of your right of residence. We should consider initiating a formal legal notification process." "Legal notification?" I asked, unsure of what he meant. "Yes," Mr. Peterson explained. "I will arrange a meeting with your son, Michael, on your behalf. I will formally present him with a copy of the key clauses of the will concerning your right of residence and his duty of care. I will make it unequivocally clear that if they continue with their current behavior, fail to fulfill their obligations, or attempt to infringe upon your legal rights, then, according to the will and relevant elder protection laws, you reserve the right to pursue legal action and potentially initiate a review of the inheritance conditions stipulated in the will." He simplified it for me. Basically, it's a formal, serious legal warning. I listened quietly, a storm of emotions churning inside me. I never thought it would come to this. I just wanted to live out my remaining years in peace, yet here I was, being forced to wield the law as a weapon against my own son. But they had been the first to cross the line. I took a deep breath and made my decision. "All right, Daniel, let's do it your way. Send the letter as soon as possible, and you can arrange the meeting with Michael." It was time they learned a few things. "Of course, Mrs. Miller," Mr. Peterson promised gravely. "Leave everything to me. I will handle it with care to achieve the warning effect while trying not to escalate the conflict more than necessary. Hanging up the phone, I walked to the window and looked out at the gray sky. A storm was brewing. I knew an unavoidable confrontation was coming. But this time, I would not be the helpless old woman shivering in the cold, waiting for someone else's mercy. My fortress was built, and my weapon was polished. The undercurrents were swirling on their end, and on mine, I was ready. Mr. Peterson was highly efficient. The day after our call, he informed me that the legal letter had been formally sent to the realty company. The effect was immediate. I received no more harassing calls from any realtors. But the peace was superficial. I knew the real confrontation was yet to come. Sure enough, 2 days later, on a Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. I looked at the familiar name, my heart calm. I only felt a sense of, here we go. I answered the phone, my voice as even as ever. Hello, Michael. The voice that came from the other end was not Michael's usual tired and perfunctory tone. It was filled with anxiety, confusion, and a barely suppressed rage. Mom, what on earth are you trying to do? His voice was sharp and rushed, almost a shout. Why did you send a lawyer to see me? Talking about some will, some legal warning. What is all this about? It seemed Mr. Peterson had followed through with the plan. And the effect was clearly significant. It had hit a nerve. I walked over to the sofa and sat down, getting comfortable before I spoke slowly. Michael, calm down. Mr. Peterson is my lawyer. He was simply doing his job, informing you of some things you needed to know. Things I needed to know? Michael's voice cracked with emotion. Mom, I'm your son. Can't we talk about things ourselves? Why did you have to bring in an outsider, a lawyer, to threaten me? Do you have any idea what he told me today? He said I have no say over the old apartment, that if Jessica and I don't fulfill our duty of care, I could lose my inheritance. What is that even about? When did we ever not take care of you? It was one time we forgot to give you the new key. Jessica's words were harsh. Yes, but do you really need to blow it up like this? And bringing up a will? When did Dad even make a will? Why didn't we know anything about it? His barrage of questions came like cannonballs full of hurt, anger, and disbelief. I listened quietly, letting him vent. When he was finished, I said coolly, Michael, that will was made by your father and me, together, before he passed. We had Mr. Peterson notarize it. It is legal and valid. The reason we didn't tell you was because we didn't think it was necessary. We hoped for peace in the family, but now it seems your father was right. I paused, then continued in a steady voice. As for the duty of care, it's about more than just providing food and shelter. Respect is the most basic form of care. Locking me out of the house for 2 hours and calling me an outsider, is that respect? The moment I move out, you contact a realtor to try and get rid of my home, is that respect? My voice was low, but every word was clear and sharp, traveling through the phone line to Michael's ear. The other end fell silent, filled only with the sound of his heavy breathing. After a long moment, he spoke again, his voice tinged with defeat and disbelief. Mom, how did you become like this? So calculating. We're your son and daughter-in-law. That old apartment is just sitting empty. We thought if we rented it out or sold it, the money could be put to good use. It could improve your life, too. How did that become infringing on your rights? Improve my life? I almost scoffed. Michael, I am 66 years old. The improvement I need is a quiet, respectful environment. It's basic dignity, not the kind of life you think I should have. That apartment is my nest, my last resort. How it's managed. When it's managed, that should be my decision, not yours to make behind my back. My tone sharpened slightly. And as for being calculating, Michael, search your conscience. For the past 10 years, who has been calculating whom? I gave you all the rent from the old apartment every month. I did all the housework. I raised Caleb. What did I ever calculate? All I wanted in return for my work was a peaceful old age. And what did I get? I got called an outsider. My words were like needles, pricking at Michael's conscience. He fell silent again, this time for longer. I could picture his expression, shock, panic, and the shame of being exposed. He had probably never imagined that his meek, submissive mother would so clearly lay out the accounts like this. "Mom." When he finally spoke, his voice was much lower, raspy with fatigue. Even if Jessica was wrong, and I didn't do enough as a son, I apologize. But can we please not make such a big deal out of this? What Mr. Peterson said was terrifying. We're family. Can't we solve our problems behind closed doors? Why do we have to take it to court? We'll become a laughingstock. I don't want to make a big deal of it either, I said, my tone softening but my stance remaining firm. Michael, the reason I had Mr. Peterson talk to you wasn't to sue you or to make us a laughingstock. It was to make you and Jessica understand a few things. I spoke each word distinctly. First, I may be old, but I'm not senile. I have my rights and my boundaries. Second, that old apartment is mine. No one, without my permission, is to touch it. Third, how you treat me will directly affect what you will inherit from me in the future. The law isn't just words on a piece of paper. Mom, Michael's voice held a note of pleading. Please don't be like this. We know we were wrong, okay? Please move back in. I promise. Jessica will never be disrespectful to you again, and I will pay more attention to you. Let's just go back to how things were, okay? Go back to how things were? I repeated the phrase softly, a bitter taste in my mouth. Michael, we can't go back. Not since the moment I was locked out. Not since I heard the word outsider. We can never go back. I'm doing well in the old apartment. It's quiet. I don't want to go back to that life of walking on eggshells and living in constant anxiety. I finished with a tone of finality. Michael, I've made myself clear. From now on, you live your life, and I'll live mine. As long as you don't bother me, we can maintain the appearance of a mother-son relationship. But if you have any other ideas, or if you disrupt my life again, I left the sentence unfinished, but the warning was clear. On the other end of the line, there was a long, dead silence. In the end, Michael said nothing more and quietly hung up. Listening to the dial tone, I put down the phone and let out a long breath. My palms were sweaty from the tension, but my mind was clear. I knew this conversation, this hard-line stance delivered through a lawyer, was like a bucket of cold water, shocking my son out of his fantasy that his mother could be treated however he pleased. He might be angry, confused, or resentful, but he would have to accept the fact that his mother was no longer an outsider he could take for granted. The prelude to the storm had sounded, and I had shown my hand. Now, it was up to them to choose, respect and restraint, or to continue down a path of self-destruction. I walked to the window. The setting sun cast a golden glow on the old buildings. My heart was at peace. If I couldn't have the warmth of family, then upholding the justice of the law and my own dignity would be another way to live. After that unpleasant phone call with Michael, life seemed to enter a strange, eerie calm. Michael didn't call again, and even the perfunctory text messages stopped completely. On social media, I'd occasionally see Jessica post pictures of the three of them out to dinner or at the movies. They looked happy and carefree, as if my absence hadn't affected their quality of life at all. In fact, it seemed to have made it better. That was fine by me. I was happy for the quiet. The old apartment, under my care, was looking more and more like a home. I bought a few houseplants. They weren't anything fancy, but their vibrant green was comforting to look at. I cleaned up the balcony, and on sunny days, I could sit out there, soak up the sun, and watch people come and go in the alley below. I reconnected with a few of my old neighbors. Sometimes we'd sit in the community garden, chatting. They would complain about their daughters-in-law or brag about their adorable grandchildren. Their conversations were filled with the everyday concerns of ordinary older people. In that atmosphere, I finally felt like a normal, living person again, not just an awkward presence in my son's house. I even picked up an old hobby of mine, listening to classic opera. I used some of my retirement savings to buy a nice radio and would tune into the classical station. The soaring arias, paired with a cup of tea, could fill a whole afternoon. Time slowed down, and my mind grew quiet. But the calmer things were on the surface. The more I knew it was likely the calm before the storm. Michael and Jessica, especially Jessica, were not the type to take a loss lying down. The lawyer's warning might have scared them for a while, but in the long run, I doubted they would give up, especially not on the old apartment. I tried to guess their next move. Would Michael try to sweet-talk me again? Would Jessica show up at my door throwing a tantrum? Or would they come up with some other scheme? I prepared myself for anything. Come what may, I would face it. However, I never imagined their counterattack would be so vile and vicious. It was an ordinary morning. I was on my way to the nearby farmer's market as usual. As I reached the end of the alley, I sensed something was off. A few old neighbors who usually greeted me now averted their eyes, huddling together and whispering. When they saw me approaching, they quickly dispersed, pretending nothing was wrong. I was puzzled, but didn't think much of it, and continued to the market. On my way back, at the entrance to my building, I ran into Mrs. Davis from the floor below me. She was a warm-hearted woman who had always been kind to me. She saw me and immediately pulled me aside. Her voice was low, her face a mixture of worry and anger. "Carol, have you upset someone recently?" My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my composure. "Mrs. Davis, what's wrong? What happened?" "Oh, you don't know?" Mrs. Davis slapped her thigh. "For the past couple of days, someone has been posting these awful flyers all over the neighborhood, on the community bulletin board too. They're saying you're a disrespectful old woman, that you drove a wedge between your son and his wife, caused chaos in their home, and that you're using the fact that you own an apartment to try and ruin their lives. The things they're saying are just terrible." My head buzzed and blood rushed to my face. I had expected something, but to hear such vicious slander, I still trembled with anger. "What else?" Mrs. Davis grew more indignant as she spoke. "They're also saying you were promiscuous when you were younger, and now you're just a bitter, difficult old woman. Just a bunch of baseless, reputation-destroying lies. A lot of people who don't know the truth are talking." I suppressed the rage and humiliation in my heart and asked as calmly as I could, "Mrs. Davis, are those things still up?" The ones on the community board were torn down by the association, but then more just get put up. They're like gum on a shoe. And some people have found little leaflets slipped under their doors. Mrs. Davis sighed, looking at me with pity. "Carol, I know you're not like that. This has to be someone deliberately trying to slander you. Do you think it's your son and his wife?" I nodded, a coldness spreading through me. Who else could it be? Using such a low-down tactic, trying to force me into submission with rumors, to destroy my reputation among my old neighbors and make my life here unbearable. It was a cruel move, far more insidious and wicked than a direct confrontation. "Thank you, Mrs. Davis, for telling me," I said, gratefully squeezing her hand. "The truth will speak for itself. I haven't done anything wrong, and I'm not afraid of what people say." Despite my brave words, when I walked past the community bulletin board and saw the torn remnants and glue stains, and the stares of a few strangers who pointed at me, I felt a heavy stone settle in my chest, suffocating and painful. I kept my head down and hurried home. I closed the door, leaning my back against the cold steel, and finally felt like I could breathe again. Tears of humiliation welled in my eyes, but I forced them back. What good would crying do? Tears couldn't wash away slander. They would only give the people behind this the satisfaction of seeing me suffer. I walked to the window and looked out at the gray sky. I had thought that by standing my ground legally, I could find peace. It seemed I had underestimated the depths of human malice. They didn't dare to confront me openly, so they shot arrows from the shadows, using the oldest and most effective weapon against me, rumors. For a solitary old woman, this was a devastating attack. Lies, repeated often enough, can destroy a person. If I let this go, my reputation would be ruined. I might not be able to hold my head up in the very place I had lived for decades. I couldn't just sit back and take it. I took a deep breath and picked up my phone again. This time, I didn't call Mr. Peterson. A lawyer's intervention might not be effective in this situation and could even make things worse. I found the number for the head of the neighborhood association, Mrs. Rodriguez. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, well respected in the community. I had known her from before. When she answered, I calmly explained the situation. I didn't directly accuse my son and daughter-in-law. I simply said that I seemed to have offended someone and was now the target of a malicious slander campaign, which was seriously affecting my life and reputation. Mrs. Rodriguez was very concerned and angry. "Carol, don't you worry. We won't tolerate this kind of behavior in our community. I'll have someone patrol the area and remove any defamatory flyers immediately. I'll also post a notice in the community group chat, reminding everyone not to believe or spread rumors. If you find out who's behind this, or if you have any evidence, you should report it to the police." "Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez," I said sincerely. "I don't have any proof right now, but I will be on the lookout." Hanging up, I felt a little better. With the community association involved, it would at least curb the spread of the rumors. But I knew it wasn't enough. The root of the problem remained. As I was contemplating my next move, whether to inform Mr. Peterson or to take further action, like gathering evidence to sue for slander, my phone rang again. It was a local landline number that looked vaguely familiar. I answered it. A familiar and loathsome voice came through the line. It was my daughter-in-law, Jessica. Her tone wasn't cold or harsh like before. It was filled with a syrupy, fake concern and feigned sympathy. But underneath it all, I could hear a note of triumph and provocation. "Mom? It's me, Jessica," she said, drawing out the words. "I heard you've been having some trouble over there, that the neighbors have some misunderstandings about you." I gripped the phone, my fingers tightening. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. The storm was no longer hiding. It had revealed its ugly face, and this time it was armed with vicious rumors, intending to destroy me completely. Jessica's voice oozed through the receiver, her feigned concern as cloying as grease. "Mom, it's just so awful, having the whole neighborhood gossip like that. When Michael and I heard about it, we were just heartbroken for you." She sighed, as if she truly felt my pain. "You know, if you ask me, living all alone in that run-down old place just makes you a target. Why don't you just move back in with us? When we're all a family together, none of this drama ever happens." I could almost picture her expression, a smug, condescending smirk, as she watched her little drama unfold. The rumors were her doing, and now she was using them, under the guise of concern, to force me back under her roof, back into the role of the powerless outsider. Rage churned in my chest. But after everything I had been through, I had learned to control it. I took a deep breath, my voice as cold as ice. "Jessica, you know better than anyone where those rumors came from. You can stop the crocodile tears." There was a pause, and then Jessica's voice turned cold as well, the pretense stripped away. "Mom, now you're the one being nasty. How would we know? We just heard what other people were saying. Maybe if you weren't so difficult to get along with, you wouldn't have people talking about you," she huffed. "I was being nice, offering you a way out. If you want to be stubborn and tough it out on your own, don't come crying to us when your reputation is ruined and you can't even live there anymore." A naked threat. I actually laughed, a cold, bitter laugh. "A way out? Thank you for your concern, but my reputation is none of your business. My conscience is clear. I'm not afraid of whispers in the dark. But you, on the other hand, using such dirty tricks, aren't you afraid of a little karma?" "You," Jessica was sputtering, furious. "Carol, don't push your luck. We're trying to be civil for Michael's sake. Do you really think we want you back here? You're just a..." The filthy insult finally came out. I didn't get angry. I just calmly cut her off. "Are you finished? Because if you are, I'm hanging up. And by the way, this is my formal notice to you. Do not call me again. Do not interfere in my life again. If you do, you will face the consequences." "Consequences? What consequences?" Jessica shrieked with laughter. "You think that pathetic old Will is going to scare us? Let me tell you, that apartment belongs to Michael. What right do you, an old woman, have to squat in it? We have plenty of ways to make you hand it over. Do you?" My voice was still level, but it carried an unshakable force. "Then by all means, try. But I suggest that before you do anything else, you take 7 days to cool off." 7 days? What's that supposed to mean?" Jessica demanded. "It means nothing in particular," I said. "It's just a suggestion. After 7 days, if you still want to cause trouble, I will be ready. Just don't regret it later." Without giving her another chance to speak, I hung up and immediately blocked her number. I put the phone down, my knuckles white from gripping it so tightly. I was calm on the surface, but Jessica's venomous words still stung. They had become so shameless, so willing to discard even the last shred of decency. 7 days. I repeated it to myself. This wasn't a cooling-off period for them. It was the final preparation window for Mr. Peterson. Just before Jessica's call, I had made a difficult decision. The slander campaign had crossed a line. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a blatant attack on my character and an illegal infringement on my rights. If I continued to be passive, they would only become more brazen. I contacted Mr. Peterson again and told him about the rumors. He was furious, stating that this constituted slander and harassment, a serious violation of my rights to reputation and peace. Mrs. Miller, their behavior has become truly reprehensible, he said gravely. A simple legal letter and a warning are clearly not enough to stop them. We must take more decisive legal action to resolve this once and for all and protect your rights. After some discussion, we decided to initiate the final plan. Mr. Peterson would, on my behalf, issue a final legal ultimatum to Michael and Jessica, giving them 7 days to comply with 2 demands. First, they must immediately cease all slander and harassment and issue a public written apology in the same areas where the rumors were spread, such as the community bulletin board and resident groups. Second, they must provide a written guarantee that they would respect my rights of residence, property, and personal dignity, and fulfill their duty of care, acknowledging their previous wrongdoing in locking me out and attempting to dispose of my property. If they refused to comply within the 7-day period, I would no longer be bound by familial ties. I would formally file a lawsuit against them for violating elder rights, including, but not limited to, infringement of residency rights, defamation, and neglect, and simultaneously trigger the review of the conditions of the will, petitioning the court to revoke or reduce Michael's inheritance rights. It was a point of no return decision. Once we went to court, the mother-son bond would be irrevocably broken, but this sword had to hang over their heads. Only by making them feel the true weight of the law and the severe consequences of their actions would they possibly back down. Otherwise, I would have no peace in my remaining years. These 7 days were an ordeal for me, and for them, a final chance at redemption. Mr. Peterson acted quickly. That same afternoon, he confirmed that the formal legal letter and final ultimatum had been delivered to Michael and Jessica via courier and email. For the next few days, I lived my life as usual, shopping, cooking, listening to opera, enjoying the Sunday, but a knot of tension remained in my stomach. I kept an eye on the community. The rumors did seem to have died down. At least, I saw no new flyers. The neighbors' stares were still a bit awkward, but the pointing and whispering had stopped. There was no response from Michael and Jessica. No calls, no texts, and certainly no apology. Just a dead silence. I imagined their reactions upon receiving the letter furious, panicked, or perhaps dismissive, thinking I was bluffing. The 7th day arrived. I waited from morning until night. My phone remained silent. There was no news of compromise or communication. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red, the last flicker of hope in my heart died out. They had chosen to fight to the end. They didn't believe I would actually sue them. They didn't believe the law would be on my side. Or perhaps, blinded by greed and resentment, they simply no longer cared about the consequences. In that case, there was nothing left to hesitate about. I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Peterson's number. My voice was steady, without a ripple of emotion. "Daniel, the 7 days are up. There has been no response." Mr. Peterson was silent for a moment on the other end, then said with gravity, "I understand, Mrs. Miller. I will file the lawsuit with the court first thing tomorrow morning." "Good," I replied with a single word, and hung up. Outside, the night was falling. I knew an unavoidable showdown was about to begin, and this time, I would not back down. The 7-day agreement was over. The ultimatum had expired. The next time we met, it would be in court. The days after filing the lawsuit were marked by a profound, deathly silence. It was as if Michael and Jessica had vanished from the face of the earth. There was no news from them whatsoever. Even the vicious rumors had completely disappeared. The community returned to its usual tranquility. Mrs. Rodriguez even called to check on me, saying the trouble had stopped and that I should rest easy. But this peace felt like the unnervingly still eye of a hurricane, so oppressive it was hard to breathe. I knew it was just a facade. Once the gears of the law begin to turn, they don't stop easily. Mr. Peterson informed me that the court had accepted the case, and the summons and complaint would soon be served to the defendants. I went about my daily life, but I was fully aware that a massive storm was brewing. I even prepared myself for them to show up at my door, ready for a fight or some other desperate act. However, I had once again underestimated their arrogance and ignorance. 3 days before the court date, I received a rather surprising call from Mr. Peterson. His tone was complex, a mixture of relief and a hint of sadness. "Mrs. Miller, there's been a new development," he said. "I just received a call from the court. Your son, Michael, he's asking for you to drop the suit." "Drop the suit?" I was taken aback. "I haven't sued them yet." Then I realized what he meant. Did they make a move? "No, it's not that they're suing you," Mr. Peterson clarified. "The court's mediator contacted them to attempt a pretrial settlement. According to the mediator, your son and daughter-in-law only seemed to grasp the seriousness of the situation after being served with the summons. But instead of responding or seeking a settlement, they tried to delay by denying they had received the summons and questioning the court's jurisdiction. After the mediator clearly explained the legal process and the potential severe consequences, your son, Michael, unilaterally stated that they would waive their right to respond and forfeit any and all claims to your property inheritance. All he asks is that you drop the lawsuit and not take them to court." "Mr." Peterson paused, adding, "The mediator said your daughter-in-law was extremely agitated and said many nasty things, but your son seemed to just break down. He's willing to give up his inheritance, just for me to drop the suit." I held the phone, speechless for a long time. This was completely unexpected. I had braced myself for a fierce court battle, not for them to surrender so abjectly at the last minute. Were they finally scared? Or was it the public humiliation they couldn't face? Or perhaps, was it the last shred of conscience in Michael, finally cracking under the immense legal pressure, making him unable to face his own mother in a courtroom? 100 different emotions churned within me. I couldn't tell if it was the joy of victory or a much deeper sorrow. "Mrs. Miller, what are your thoughts?" Mr. Peterson asked for my decision. "Since they've already expressed their intent to forfeit their inheritance claims and have promised not to harass you, our primary legal objectives have essentially been met. If you agree, we can file a motion to dismiss the case. Of course, if you still want a formal judgment, we can proceed." I was silent for a long time. What good would a judgment do? It would only tear away the last shred of dignity, cementing this mother-son relationship as a legal tragedy. It wouldn't give me anything more. I had used the law to defend my rights and my dignity. That was enough. "Let's drop the suit," I finally said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. "As long as they keep their promise and leave me alone, this is over." "Understood, Mrs. Miller?" Mr. Peterson replied. "I will handle the remaining paperwork." After hanging up, I sat alone on the sofa. The last rays of the setting sun streamed through the window, casting long shadows on the floor. A dramatic legal war had ended in an almost absurdly anticlimactic way. I felt no joy, only a vast emptiness and a profound sadness. I had won. With the law and the will, I had won back my home and my peace. But what I had lost was my only son and the home that had once held 10 years of my life. Was that really a victory? I didn't know. A few days later, news spread like wildfire through the old neighborhood and eventually reached me, not from Michael, but from Mrs. Davis. She told me in a hushed, conspiratorial tone, "Carol, did you hear? Your son's family? I think they're moving." "Moving?" I was stunned. "Moving where? Did their lease run out? Did the landlord not renew? Or did they buy a new place?" "I'm not sure," Mrs. Davis said, "but I saw them packing things up. They seem to be in a real hurry. I mean, who moves right before the holidays?" A thought struck me. A lease? I thought they owned that condo. How could it be a rental? A vague suspicion began to form in my mind. I immediately called Mr. Peterson and asked him to look up the property information for the condo where my son lived. The results came back quickly, confirming my suspicion. The condo was not owned by Michael and Jessica, it was a rental. All their money plus the $30,000 I had given them and the 10 years of my rental income had likely been spent on maintaining their glamorous lifestyle, on Jessica's designer bags and so-called investments. They couldn't afford to buy a home. They were probably in debt. The claims about a mortgage had been a complete lie. No wonder they were so desperate to get their hands on my old apartment. No wonder they crumbled so easily in the face of the law. They were a house of cards. This final piece of information was like the last piece of a puzzle, showing me the complete picture of the last 10 years. What a massive web of lies and vanity I had been living in. My sacrifices had not only been unappreciated, they had fueled their greed and hypocrisy. The morning after I learned they were moving, I was cleaning my apartment when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I wondered who it could be. I looked through the peephole and froze. Standing outside were 3 people: Michael, Jessica, and a reluctant-looking Caleb. Behind them were 2 uniformed court officers and Mr. Peterson. Michael's face was ashen, his eyes darting away, unable to meet mine. Jessica's face was a mask of resentment and bitterness, but also a kind of desperate fear. Caleb was staring down at his phone, as if none of this had anything to do with him. I hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. Mrs. Miller, one of the court officers, stepped forward, showing his credentials. His tone was official. "We are from the County Sheriff's Department, Civil Enforcement Division. Regarding the case of Carol Miller versus Michael Miller and Jessica Miller, although the plaintiff has filed for a dismissal, based on the evidence provided and the commitments made by both parties during pre-trial mediation, to ensure the plaintiff's rights are not infringed upon in the future, we are here today to conduct a formal follow-up and notification and to supervise the defendant's fulfillment of their written promise, namely, to permanently forfeit any and all claims to the property at this address, and to guarantee they will cease any and all forms of harassment against you." The officer's voice was clear and firm, echoing in the stairwell. Michael and Jessica hung their heads even lower. Mr. Peterson stepped forward and handed me a document. "Mrs. Miller, this is a notarized copy of their signed statement, forfeiting their inheritance rights and guaranteeing they will not harass you. Please keep it." I took the document. The paper was light, but it felt as heavy as lead. The officer continued, addressing Michael and Jessica. "We expect you to abide by the law and your signed commitment. Do not cause any further trouble. Otherwise, Mrs. Miller can refile her suit at any time based on these documents, and there will be no further opportunity for mediation." "We know. We understand." Michael's voice was hoarse, the words barely squeezed out from his throat. Jessica suddenly looked up, her eyes glaring at me with pure hatred, as if they were dipped in poison. Her lips trembled. She looked like she wanted to spit some final, venomous words at me. But seeing the stern faces of the court officers, she swallowed them back, left with nothing but heavy breathing and eyes full of rage. And so, my family stood before my door, under the supervision of law enforcement, to perform this final, humiliating ritual. They hadn't come out of love to apologize. They had been compelled by the force of the law to guarantee they would leave me alone. The scene was absurd, cold, and brutally real. "The procedure is complete. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Miller." The officer nodded to me, gave Michael's family one last stern look, and then left with Mr. Peterson. The stairwell was now empty except for the 4 of us, facing each other in a ningu de konhi. It was Michael who finally broke the silence, his voice broken, almost a plea. "Mom, we're moving today." From now on, he couldn't continue. Jessica yanked his arm sharply. "What are you still talking to her for? Let's go," she hissed. She shot me one last venomous glare, grabbed Caleb, and stormed down the stairs without a backward glance. Michael remained, looking at me one last time. His expression was a storm of emotions: shame, pain, relief, and maybe, just maybe, a final, lingering trace of affection he himself might not have recognized. Then he, too, turned and stumbled after them, his footsteps disappearing down the stairs. I leaned against the doorframe, looking out at the empty stairwell. Sunlight streamed through the window, dust motes dancing in the beams. They were gone. They had taken their bitterness and humiliation with them, and they had also taken any last faint hope of reconciliation. Where would they go? I didn't know, and I no longer cared. From the moment they chose to build their lives on lies and treat their family with malice, their path was destined to be a difficult one. I closed the door, shutting out the world. The apartment was quiet, the only sound the ticking of the old clock. I walked to the center of the living room and looked around my small nest, old but entirely mine, and filled with a sense of security. The plant on the windowsill had new shoots, tender and green, full of life. I had won. With the weapon of the law, I had protected my home, my dignity, and the peace of my final years. But I had lost my son, and I had lost the family I had once considered my own. Tears finally streamed down my face, not of anger or of self-pity, but of a vast, unspeakable sadness and loneliness. The war that had started with a cold, locked door had ended with a court-supervised departure. There were no winners, only mutual destruction. But life had to go on. I dried my tears and walked to the balcony. The sun was warm on my skin. In the alley below, old neighbors were chatting leisurely and children were playing. This was my life now. One woman, one old apartment, and a peace guaranteed by law. Perhaps this, at 66 years old, was my true home. I picked up a small watering can and began to water my plants. The water trickled down, nourishing the dry soil, and it felt as though it were nourishing my own barren heart as well. The past was the past. For the days to come, I would live, and live well, for myself. My wife's family will always come first. You will always be last. My son, Matthew, spoke those words, looking me straight in the eye. Brittany, my daughter-in-law, nodded from the couch. I agree, she said. With that coldness I had come to know so well, I felt the blow. But I didn't crumble. I looked at both of them and responded with an icy calm. Good to know. They didn't know what they had just unleashed. They didn't know that tonight I would make the most important decision of my 66 years. I would sell my apartment. I would call in every marker. I would invest every single dollar in myself. And when the financial emergency hit them weeks later, when they came asking me to pay off their debts, what happened next would leave them completely speechless. But before we get there, I need you to understand how we arrived at this moment. I need you to see the 40 years of sacrifices that brought me to this living room, to this conversation, to this breaking point. It all started when I was 26. Matthew had just been born. My husband died 9 years later in a car crash that shattered our family. I was 35. Matthew was 9. I remember that first night of widowhood. Matthew was crying in his room. I was crying in the kitchen, surrounded by unpaid bills and a future that looked like a black abyss. My mother-in-law suggested I move back in with my parents, that I look for another husband, that I leave Matthew with her on the weekends so I could restart my life, as if my son were a mistake, as if my life needed to be erased and rewritten. I said no. I worked double shifts at the department store downtown. I came home with my feet bleeding inside my shoes. But Matthew ate 3 meals a day. He had clean clothes. He had new books at the start of every school year. What I ate or didn't eat didn't matter. He was my absolute priority. I sold my wedding jewelry when Matthew turned 15. Those gold bracelets my husband gave me for our anniversary. I sold them one by one to pay for his tuition at the best private school in the city. I remember the day the jeweler weighed them. I remember how they shone under the cold light of the store. I remember thinking, this is love. This is what a mother does. Matthew never knew. I never told him that those bracelets paid for 3 years of his education. I never told him that sometimes I ate only toast so he could have roast chicken twice a week. I thought that was how love was built. I thought silent sacrifice was the right way to be a mother. I was wrong. When Matthew got into college, I sold the car, the only car we had. It was a beater, but it ran. I sold it to pay for his enrollment and the first 2 semesters of his engineering degree. His dream. After that, I took 2 buses to get to work, 3 to get back. I left the house at 6 in the morning. I got back at 9 at night. My legs swelled up so much I couldn't take my shoes off without pain. But Matthew was studying at a top-tier university. That was the only thing that mattered. I turned down 3 dates with good men during those years. widowers, with stable jobs, who looked at me with genuine interest. I told them no. I didn't want any stranger making Matthew feel like he was less important. I didn't want distractions. My entire life revolved around him, around his future, around building something solid that he could inherit. Love, sacrifice, devotion. I thought that would come back to me. I believed in give and take. How naive I was. Matthew graduated with honors at 24. He got a job immediately at a major corporation. I was 59. He started earning well. Very well. He moved into a condo on the north side. I was still in the same small apartment where I raised him. I waited for him to say, "Mom, now it's my turn to take care of you." I waited for him to invite me to dinner on Sundays. I waited for something, anything. But the calls became sporadic, the visits too. He always had work. He always had commitments. There was always something more important than seeing his mother. And I waited, always waiting. He met Brittany when he was 32. I was 61. She was beautiful, confident. She came from a huge family. Mother, father, 4 siblings, 12 cousins, uncles on every corner. A loud family that celebrated everything. Birthdays, baptisms, graduations. They turned even random Tuesdays into events. From the beginning, I knew that for Brittany, I was in the way. She didn't say it. She didn't have to. She showed it in the silences. In quick glances toward Matthew when I spoke. In that way of making plans where I didn't fit. The first Christmas after they started dating, they invited me to dinner. I arrived with a cake. Matthew's favorite since he was 7. A homemade German chocolate cake. I had baked it that morning. Brittany looked at it and smiled with that smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, how sweet. But we already have dessert. My mom brought her specialty. She put my cake in the fridge. They never took it out. I found it days later when I went to help them clean up after another family dinner. It was untouched, covered in plastic wrap, forgotten. I threw it out myself, in silence, feeling something dark growing in my chest. They got married 6 months later. The wedding was big, expensive. I contributed $20,000 from my savings to help. It was everything I had saved in 5 years. Brittany wanted that specific venue. Matthew asked me for help with shining eyes. "Mom, I know it's a lot, but it's our special day." I said yes. I always said yes. At the wedding, they sat me at table 7, far from the groom, far from the head table. Brittany's parents were at the main table, her siblings too. I was with distant cousins I didn't know. Matthew passed by my table once, just once the entire night. "You doing okay, Mom?" I nodded. I smiled. I said everything was beautiful, because that was what was expected of me. To be small, to be invisible, to be convenient. Brittany got pregnant 8 months later. Lily, my first granddaughter. Matthew called me, excited. "Mom, you're going to be a grandma. We're going to need you a lot." And I ran. As always, I was at the hospital during the entire labor, 22 hours. Brittany was screaming. Brittany's mother was holding her right hand. I was in the waiting room. When Lily was born, they let me in at the very end. After 10 members of Brittany's family had gone in, I held my granddaughter for 3 minutes. 3 minutes before Brittany's mother said, "Let me hold her again." I gave her back. I went out to the hallway. I cried in the hospital bathroom, silent tears that no one saw. The first few months were intense. Brittany was on maternity leave, but she called me every day. "Patricia, can you come over? Lily won't stop crying. Patricia, I need to sleep for 2 hours. Can you watch her? Patricia, we're out of diapers. Can you bring some?" I went. I always went. I crossed the city on the bus with bags of diapers and formula that I paid for myself. I took care of Lily while Brittany slept or went out with her friends. I cleaned the kitchen. I folded the laundry. I made dinner so they would have something ready when I left. Matthew would get home from work, see me, and say, "Thanks, Mom. I don't know what we'd do without you." But he never offered to drive me home. He never asked if I was tired. He never asked what I needed. I was the solution, not the person. Lily turned 1. There was a big party in Brittany's parents' backyard. I arrived early to help decorate. I brought a yellow dress for Lily. I had embroidered it myself over 3 weeks. Little flowers on the collar, satin ribbons at the waist. Brittany looked at it. Oh, how cute! But I already have her outfit. My mom had it custom made by a designer. My dress stayed in a bag, in a corner. Lily wore the maternal grandmother's dress. I smiled in the photos. I clapped when they blew out the candle. I left early. No one noticed I was gone. 5 more years passed like that. I was the emergency grandma, the last-minute grandma, the grandma who solved things when no one else could, but never the grandma invited to the important moments. Lily's first day of school, the maternal grandmother went. The Christmas play, the maternal grandmother went. Kindergarten graduation, the maternal grandmother went. I received photos via text, days later, with a brief caption, "Look at Lily." No context, no invitation, no place in their real life. I existed in the margins, in the emergencies, in the awkward moments no one else wanted to cover. And I accepted it, because I thought that's how love worked. I believed that if I kept giving, eventually I would receive. I believed in infinite patience, in eternal waiting, that someday Matthew would wake up and say, "Mom, thank you for everything." That day never came. And then came that afternoon. The afternoon where everything changed. Matthew called me. "Mom, we need to talk. Can you come over?" I went. Of course I went. I arrived at their house at 6 in the evening. Matthew and Brittany were sitting in the living room. Serious. Lily was at the other grandmother's house. "Sit down, Mom." I sat. And then Matthew said those words that divided my life into a before and an after. "My wife's family will always come first. You will always be last." The words floated in the air like knives. Matthew didn't look away. He was serious, convinced, as if he were explaining something obvious, something I should have understood years ago. Brittany nodded beside him. "I agree," she said, with that soft voice she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. "It's important that we all understand the priorities in this family." I felt something cold run down my spine. It wasn't pain yet. It was something worse. It was clarity. That brutal clarity that arrives when you finally see what was always there, but you refuse to acknowledge. I looked at both of them. At my son, the man I raised alone, the man for whom I sold my jewelry, my car, my dreams. And at her, at the woman who had turned my son into a stranger. I took a deep breath. I counted to 5 in my mind. And I said, "Good to know." Matthew blinked. He expected something else. He expected tears. He expected me to beg. He expected me to make myself small and say, "I'm sorry, I'll do whatever it takes to be closer to you." But I said none of that. I stayed still, watching them. Brittany tilted her head. There was confusion in her eyes. "That's all you're going to say?" she asked. I smiled. It was a cold smile, a smile I didn't even recognize myself. "What else do you want me to say? You just told me what my place is. I understand perfectly." I got up from the couch. I grabbed my purse. "Thanks for the clarity. Seriously. Now I know exactly where I stand." I walked toward the door. Matthew stood up. "Mom, wait. Don't get mad. We just wanted to be honest with you." I stopped. I turned. I looked him in the eye. "I'm not mad, son. I am informed. There's a difference." I walked out. I closed the door carefully, without slamming it, without drama. I walked down the stairs slowly. I felt my legs trembling, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. It was something waking up inside me after decades of being asleep. The way home was long. 2 buses, 40 minutes in total. I sat by the window and watched the city go by. The afternoon lights. People walking fast toward their homes, toward their families, toward places where they were a priority. I thought about all the times I crossed this same city to go to them. How many times did I carry heavy bags on the bus? How many times did I arrive tired and still start cleaning their house? How many times did I pretend it didn't hurt to be invisible? How many times did I swallow silent humiliations because I thought that was love? How many times did I make myself small so they could feel big? 40 years. 40 years of being the last priority in the lives of the people I always put first. Something broke in my chest. But it wasn't my heart. It was a cage. A cage I had built around my life myself. And finally, after so long, the doors opened. I got to my apartment at 8 o'clock at night. It was small, 2 bedrooms, narrow kitchen, bathroom with old tiles. But it was mine, completely paid off. I had finished paying for it 3 years ago. After 32 years of monthly payments, I never missed. I locked the door. I took off my shoes. The silence wrapped around me. That silence that used to feel like loneliness now felt different. It felt like space, like possibility. I went to the kitchen. I made tea. I sat at the table where I had eaten alone so many times while Matthew had dinner with Brittany's family, and for the first time in decades, I didn't feel sorry for myself. I felt rage. Clean rage. Rage that doesn't destroy but illuminates. I opened my laptop. That old laptop Matthew gave me 5 years ago when he bought a new one. I logged into my bank account. I hadn't checked the numbers closely in months. I had always been careful with money. After becoming a widow, I learned that financial security was the only thing no one could take away from you. I looked at the balance, $95,300. Life savings, from extra shifts, from denied expenses, from vacations I never took, from clothes I didn't buy, all saved for what? For an emergency? To help Matthew if he needed it? To be useful when they called? I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. I opened another tab. I searched for the market value of apartments in my area. My apartment, according to 3 different sites, was worth between $370,000 and $400,000. The neighborhood had appreciated. It was downtown, close to the subway, close to everything. I was living on top of a gold mine and didn't even know it. I ran the numbers. If I sold the apartment for $380,000, if I bought a smaller, modern one in another area for $200,000, I'd have $180,000 left over, plus the $95,000 I had saved, $275,000. At 66 years old, debt-free, with a stable pension of $1,200 a month, I did more calculations. If I invested $200,000 in a conservative fund at 5% annually, it would generate $10,000 a year, plus my pension, plus $75,000 as a backup for real emergencies. I could live. I could live well. I could travel. I could take classes. I could do all those things I always postponed because I was waiting to be a priority, waiting to be needed, waiting to exist in my son's life. No more. I opened a new document. I started typing. Life plan. Patricia. I smiled as I typed my name. How long since I thought of myself as a person separate from my role as mom? I wrote, 1. Sell current apartment. 2. Buy smaller, modern apartment, just for me. 3. Invest the difference. 4. Set clear boundaries with Matthew and Brittany. 5. Stop being the solution to their problems. 6. Start living for myself. 6 points. 6 steps toward a life I should have started living years ago. I saved the document. I named it My New Life. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruelty. It was survival. It was justice after 40 years of silent injustice. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake thinking about everything, about every sacrifice, about every moment where I was invisible. The day Matthew graduated from college, and in the celebration photos, I appeared in 2. Only 2 photos out of 43 that Brittany posted on social media. I counted them. That night I counted them all. The day of Lily's christening. I paid for the christening gown, $200. Brittany chose a very expensive one. I paid for it without a peep. In the christening photos, I appear in the background, out of focus, like an accident, like someone who was just passing by. The day Matthew turned 40. There was a surprise party. Brittany organized everything. She called me 2 days before. Patricia, there's going to be a party for Matthew on Saturday. At 8, don't say anything. I arrived at 8. The party had started at 7. They had already sung Happy Birthday. They had already cut the cake. Oh, we thought you weren't coming, Brittany said. Lie. They didn't think of me at all. Memories. Hundreds of memories crushing me in that dark bed. My 65th birthday. Matthew called me 3 days later. Sorry, Mom. I missed it. How was it? He asked. I told him it was fine. Lie. I spent it alone. Eating canned soup. Watching TV. Crying in the bathroom so no one would hear me. No one. not even the walls. Mother's Day last year. Brittany posted a long post. Beautiful. About her mother. About how wonderful she was. About how much she loved her. About how she was her best friend. Matthew commented, "Best mother-in-law in the world." I didn't receive even a call that day. Not one. I waited until 11 at night. Nothing. The next day, Matthew sent a text. "Sorry, Mom. It was a really heavy day. It was always a heavy day when it came to me. At 4 in the morning, I made a decision. I didn't make it with rage. I made it with clarity. That cold clarity that comes when you finally accept the truth." Matthew had told me my place, the last place, very well. If I was last in his life, then it was time to be first in mine. I got up, made coffee, opened the laptop again. I searched for real estate agencies. I found one with good reviews. I sent them an email. "Good morning. I have a downtown apartment I want to sell. Can we schedule an appraisal appointment?" Send. Then I searched for new apartments. Modern. In quiet areas. Far from where Matthew lived. Far from that part of the city where I was always available. Always close. Always ready to run when they called. I found 3 interesting options. I bookmarked them. Then I looked for something else. Something I had dreamed of for 20 years but never allowed myself. Travel. Trips for solo women. Trips for seniors. Packages to Peru. To Colombia. To Argentina. To places I always wanted to see but postponed because how was I going to spend money on myself when Matthew might need it? How was I going to be far away when they might call? But now everything was different. Now I was the last priority. And being their last priority, I could finally be my own first priority. I found a tour to Machu Picchu. 15 days, $3,000. I added it to the cart. I didn't buy it yet. But I left it there, waiting, like a promise. The sun was starting to come up when I closed the laptop. I hadn't slept, but I felt more awake than ever. Something had changed. Something deep, something irreversible. And for the first time in 40 years, I wasn't afraid. I had clarity. And clarity, I discovered that morning, is much more powerful than blind love. The next few days were strange, silent, liberating. Matthew didn't call. Brittany neither. It was as if my calm response had bewildered them so much they didn't know what to do with me. Good. Let them be bewildered. I had things to do. The real estate agency answered my email in less than 2 hours. "Of course, Miss Patricia. We can come tomorrow at 10 in the morning to do the appraisal," I confirmed. That night I cleaned the apartment like never before. Not because it was dirty, but because I needed to see it with new eyes. With the eyes of someone who was about to let it go. Every corner of that place held a memory. The kitchen where I made thousands of breakfasts for Matthew before school. The living room where we did homework together for years. His room, which still kept some of his old books. Memories. All memories of a time when I thought I was building something solid. Something reciprocal. I was wrong. But it didn't hurt anymore. It was just data. The agent arrived on time. His name was David, about 40 years old. Gray suit. Professional smile. He walked through the apartment with a critical eye. He measured, he took photos, he checked the finishes. I followed him in silence, watching him evaluate my life with numbers and square footage. After 30 minutes, he sat with me at the kitchen table. "Miss Patricia, this apartment is in an excellent location, close to the subway, shopping district, safe, and you've kept it immaculate." I smiled. Of course I kept it immaculate. It was the only thing I had. "What's your assessment?" I asked. David took out his tablet. He showed me comparables, similar apartments in the area, recent sale prices. "I'd say we can list it on the market at $380,000. Maybe we get offers up to $400,000 if we find the right buyer." I felt something expand in my chest. Freedom. That was freedom. "How long would it take to sell?" David smiled. "In this area, with these conditions, I estimate between 3 and 6 weeks. I signed the contract that same afternoon. David took more professional photos. We made a virtual tour. He wrote a description that made my modest apartment sound like a hidden treasure. And maybe it was. Maybe I had been sitting on a treasure all this time and was so busy being invisible that I never noticed. "We'll upload it tomorrow to all the platforms," David said as he left. Get ready to receive calls. I closed the door. I leaned against it. And I laughed. I laughed alone in my empty living room. A laugh that came from somewhere deep inside that I had forgotten existed. I was doing it. I was really doing it. It wasn't an abstract plan. It was real, and it was mine. That night I received a text from Matthew. "Mom, are you okay? We haven't heard from you." I read it 3 times. I looked for some trace of genuine concern, of real interest. I didn't find it. It was the kind of message you send out of obligation, out of protocol, to be able to say you checked the box. I responded simply, "I'm fine. Busy with some personal things." He wrote back immediately. "What things?" I took 20 minutes to reply. Before, I would have answered in seconds. I would have explained everything. I would have indirectly asked for permission to have my own life. But now it was different. Just my things. Nothing urgent. "How is Lily?" I changed the subject. He replied with a photo of Lily at the park, with the other grandmother. "Of course," I replied with a heart emoji. Nothing else. I put the phone down and went on with my night. I made dinner for myself, pasta with vegetables, white wine. I sat on the small balcony and ate slowly, savoring it. How long since I savored my own food? The calls started on the 3rd day. David was right. My apartment generated immediate interest. 5 people wanted to see it. We scheduled appointments. I cleaned. I organized. I dressed up nicely to receive the visitors. The first couple were young, newlyweds. They walked through the apartment with bright eyes. "It's perfect," she said. "Exactly what we were looking for." They made an offer of $360,000. Low, David recommended waiting. I waited. The second visit was a single man, investor. He looked at everything coldly. Offered $350,000. "That's my final offer," he said. I told him I'd think about it. I didn't think about it. The third visit was a woman my age. A widow, too. She was looking for something smaller after selling her big house. We sat down to have coffee. We talked. She told me her story. It resembled mine. Dead husband, absent children, life on pause. "I need to start over," she said. I understood her. Perfectly. She offered $375,000, cash. "Quick closing." I said yes. We signed papers a week later. The process was surprisingly fast. She paid cash. I asked for 60 days to move out. She agreed. David was happy. It was a perfect sale. "Miss Patricia, do you have somewhere to move?" I smiled. "Not yet, but I will soon." That same afternoon I started looking seriously. I visited 3 apartments. The first was dark. The second was in bad shape. The third was perfect. Small. 1 bedroom, modern kitchen, new bathroom, laminate flooring, large windows. In a building with security. Quiet area. 40 minutes by subway from where Matthew lived. Far enough. It cost $190,000. I made an offer of $185,000. They accepted. I signed. In 3 weeks, I had sold my previous life and bought a new one. And Matthew knew nothing. Yet, I started packing slowly. Each box was a decision. What was I taking to my new life? What was I leaving behind? Matthew's childhood books. They stayed. His school trophies. They stayed. The photos where he smiled and I appeared blurry in the background. They stayed. I packed only what was mine. My clothes, my books, my few remaining jewels, my documents, my laptop, the essentials. Everything else was ballast. It was dead weight from a life that no longer fit me. I hired a moving company. Small, discreet, just the basics. I told them. They looked at the apartment. "You sure? There's a lot of stuff here." I looked around. 40 years of stuff. I'm sure. Only what I marked with green tape. It was less than half. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Matthew called. He didn't text. He called. It was Sunday afternoon. I was packing books. I saw his name on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hi, son." My voice came out calm, neutral. "Mom, we need to talk. Can you come over tomorrow?" Something in his tone alerted me. It wasn't casual. It was urgent, but urgent in that contained way. Like when you need something but don't want to seem desperate. "What do you need to talk about?" I asked. Brief silence. Better in person. Can you come? Before, I would have run. I would have canceled everything. I would have arrived in 2 hours asking what was wrong. But not now. Tomorrow I can't. I have things to do. It was true. I had an appointment with the lawyer to finalize papers. What things? There it was again. That question. As if I needed to justify my time. Personal things. Matthew, is it urgent, or can it wait? Another silence. It's important. Is someone sick? Did something bad happen? No. No one is sick. But we need to talk. Then it can wait. How about Wednesday? I heard him take a deep breath. He was frustrated. Good. Let him feel what it was like not to be a priority. Fine. Wednesday. At 6. At 7, I said. I have things until 6:30. Lie. I had nothing. But I wasn't going to run anymore. I wasn't going to be immediately available. I wasn't his instant solution anymore. Fine. At 7. He hung up. He didn't say I love you. He didn't say take care. Just hung up. I stared at the phone. I knew what was coming. I felt it in the tone of his voice. They needed something. Money, probably. Or help with Lily. Or some big favor that required me to put my life aside again. But this time was different. This time I had a plan. And nothing and no one was going to derail it. I kept packing. I found an old box in the back of the closet. I opened it. Letters. Letters Matthew wrote me when he was a child. Mom, you are the best in the world. I love you, Mom. When I grow up, I'm going to buy you a house. I read them all. I felt something tighten in my throat, but I didn't cry. That child grew up, and the man he became told me I would always be last. A child's words aren't contracts. They are innocence. They are moments. They are before the world teaches them to prioritize other things. I closed the box. I put it in the pile of things that were staying, not with anger, with acceptance, with that clean sadness that comes when you finally let go of something that was never yours to begin with. Wednesday arrived. I dressed up nicely. Not too much. Just enough to look like someone who has their life under control. Black slacks, white blouse, comfortable shoes, hair pulled back, light makeup. I looked in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from 3 weeks ago. There was something in her eyes, something solid, something unbreakable. I took my purse. Inside, I carried documents. The papers from the sale of the apartment, the papers from the purchase of the new one. Just in case I needed physical proof that my life had already changed. I left with time to spare. I took the subway. I arrived at their house at 7:03. I rang the bell. Matthew opened. He looked tired, tense. Come in, Mom. I entered. Brittany was in the living room. She also looked tense. Lily wasn't there. They had sent her to the other grandmother. Of course, whatever they needed to tell me, they didn't want witnesses. I sat down. I looked at them. I waited. And in that uncomfortable silence before they spoke, I knew exactly what was coming. And I knew exactly what I was going to answer. Matthew sat across from me. Brittany beside him. They both looked at me with that expression I knew well, need disguised as casual conversation. Mom, thanks for coming, Matthew started. I nodded. I didn't say you're welcome. I didn't say I always come. Not anymore. You want something to drink? Brittany asked. Her voice sounded sweet. Too sweet. No thanks. I'm fine. Silence. Matthew rubbed his hands together, a sign of nervousness. I knew it since he was a child. That gesture meant he had to say something difficult. Mom, we have a situation. I waited. I let the silence stretch out. Before, I would have jumped to ask what was wrong, to offer help before they asked. Now I just waited. It's about the business, Matthew continued. The project Brittany and I invested in. I knew about that project. A gourmet coffee shop. They had talked about it 6 months ago. With excitement, with big plans, with dreams of expanding. What about the business? I asked. My voice sounded neutral. Brittany leaned forward. Things didn't go as we expected. We had problems with the partner. Legal problems. And now? She stopped, looked at Matthew. He took a breath. We have debt. Mom, big debt. $45,000 that we have to pay in 3 weeks, or we lose everything. There it was. The number. The urgency. The trap disguised as trust. I understand, I said. Nothing else. Matthew blinked. You understand? He repeated. Yes, I understand you have a financial problem. I waited. Brittany bit her lip. Patricia, we need help. We've knocked on every door. The banks won't lend us anymore. My family already helped us with 20,000, but they don't have any more. And we thought maybe you. She stopped. Didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. You thought maybe I would have $45,000 tucked away. I completed for her. Matthew nodded. I know it's a lot, Mom. I know. But we're desperate. If we don't pay, we lose the entire investment. We lost $90,000, all our savings. I leaned back on the sofa. I looked at both of them. I saw real desperation in their eyes. But I also saw something else. I saw expectation. The certainty that I would say yes, because I always said yes, because I was Mom, the grandma. The solution. And how did you think I would have that amount? I asked. Matthew perked up, as if my question was a sign I was considering helping. Well, you have your apartment. Could you take out a home equity loan? Or sell it? Or sell my apartment? I repeated. Brittany intervened quickly. Not necessarily sell it. Just use the equity to get a loan. We would pay the monthly payments. It's just to get out of this emergency. The payments. They would pay the payments. Just like all the previous promises. Like when Matthew borrowed money for the car 10 years ago and paid me only 6 months. Like when Brittany needed money for the design course and never paid me back $1. Promises that evaporated as soon as they got what they needed. Let me understand this correctly, I said slowly. You invested all your money in a business that failed. Brittany's family already put in $20,000. And now you want me to risk my apartment, my only asset, to bail you out of the problem. Matthew looked uncomfortable. Don't put it like that, Mom. We're not asking you to risk it. Just to help us. We're family. Family? That word. The same word they used to put me in last place. The same word they now pulled out as a shield when they needed me. Family, I repeated. My voice remained calm. But there was something new in it. Something sharp. 3 weeks ago, you told me Brittany's family would always come first. That I would always be last. Remember? The atmosphere changed. Matthew went rigid. Mom, that was a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I looked him hard in the face. You were very clear. You told me exactly what my place was in your life. The last place. Brittany agreed. There was nothing to misunderstand. Brittany raised her hands. Patricia, we were talking about general priorities. We didn't mean we don't love you. Let's not talk about love, I said. Let's talk about facts. Let's talk about the last 5 years. How many times was I the last priority? How many times did you call me only when you needed something? How many of my birthdays did you forget? How many of Lily's events did you exclude me from? Let's talk about that. Heavy silence. Matthew looked at the floor. Brittany looked at her hands. No one spoke. Because there was no defense. Only facts. Facts they had ignored because it was convenient. So, Matthew said finally, you're not going to help us. His voice sounded hurt, as if I were the one being unfair. I took a deep breath. This was the moment. The moment I had been waiting for without knowing it for decades. No, I said simply. I am not going to help you. Matthew stood up. What? Are you serious? Completely serious. Brittany also stood up. Patricia, please, think about it. He's your son. She's your granddaughter. If we lose everything, where are we going to live? That, I said, standing up too, is not my responsibility. You are adults. You made adult decisions. Now you face adult consequences. Matthew stepped closer. Mom, I'm asking you for help. Are you really going to let me fall? Something in his tone made me angry. That tone of a child. That tone he used to manipulate me since he learned to speak. I am not letting you fall, I said firmly. You made bad financial decisions. You invested without a safety net, without a plan B. And now you want me to pay for your mistakes. Just like always. But not this time. Brittany crossed her arms. I can't believe how selfish you're being. It's your family. My family, I repeated, told me 3 weeks ago that I was the last priority. Now you need money, and suddenly I'm important. Do you see the contradiction? No one answered. Besides, I continued, I don't have the money available anymore. Matthew frowned. What do you mean? I took the papers out of my purse. I put them on the coffee table. I sold my apartment 2 weeks ago. The silence was absolute. Matthew picked up the papers. He read them. His face went from confusion to shock. You sold the apartment? When? Why? Because I decided it was time to live for myself, I answered. I bought a smaller, modern apartment. I invested the rest of the money for my future, for my travels, for my life, the life I postponed for 40 years while putting you first. Brittany went pale. You invested the money? Everything. Not everything. I left an emergency fund, for my emergencies, not for others. Matthew dropped the papers. I can't believe this. When were you going to tell us? Why would I have to tell you? I asked. Do you tell me every financial decision you make? No. Because we're independent adults. Well, so am I. Matthew ran his hands through his hair. Mom, this is pure selfishness. That word. Selfishness. The same word used to control women who finally choose to live. No, I said with a steady voice. This is self-love. This is recognizing my value. This is stopping being the constant solution to problems I didn't cause. I put my purse on my shoulder. I wish you luck with your situation. I hope you find a solution. But that solution does not include my money, nor my apartment, nor my future. I walked toward the door. Matthew followed me. Mom, if you leave now, if you leave us like this, you're going to destroy our relationship. I stopped, turned, looked him in the eye. Into those eyes I had known since he was born. Son, I said softly. Our relationship was already destroyed. Only I hadn't accepted it until now. You said it clearly. I am last. And the last ones don't rescue the first ones. That's how it works. I opened the door. When you're ready to treat me like a real priority, not like an emergency bank, we can talk. Until then, take care. I walked out. I closed the door. I walked down the stairs. And I didn't look back. My hands were shaking on the subway ride back. Not from fear, not from guilt. They were shaking from pure adrenaline. I had just done something I never imagined possible. I had said no to my son. I had set real boundaries. I had shown him that I was no longer the woman they could use and discard at their convenience. The train car was full, people coming back from work, tired, looking at their phones, living their lives, and me there, among strangers, feeling like I had just been born. As if the 66 years before had been a long rehearsal, and finally the real show was starting. My phone rang. Matthew. I declined the call. It rang again. I declined again. Then the texts arrived. One after another. Mom, please answer. We need to talk calmly. We can't end it like this. Brittany is crying. Think of Lily. That last message made me squeeze the phone. Think of Lily, the final weapon, the ultimate guilt trip. But it didn't work anymore, because thinking of Lily also meant asking myself, who thought of me all these years? I arrived at my apartment. The apartment that was no longer mine. In 3 weeks I would have to hand it over. The packed boxes reminded me there was no turning back, and I didn't want to turn back. I made tea. I sat on the balcony. The city shone below, thousands of lights, thousands of lives, each with their own dramas, their own decisions, their own silent battles. I was just one more. But for the first time in decades, my battle wasn't against myself. It was for myself. The phone kept ringing all night. Matthew. Brittany. Then an unknown number. Probably Brittany's mother. I didn't answer anything. I turned off the phone. I slept deeply, without pills, without anxiety, without that weight in my chest that accompanied me every night. I slept like I hadn't slept in years. And when I woke up, the sun was coming through the window with a different clarity. The following days were a test. Matthew kept calling. He left long voicemails. Mom, I know you're angry, but this is serious. We can lose everything. Are you really going to let that happen? Another message. I talked to Uncle Mark. He told me you're being ridiculous, that a mother doesn't do this to her son. My brother-in-law. Of course Matthew ran to find allies, to create pressure. But Uncle Mark hadn't called me in 3 years either. His opinion was worth exactly nothing. I deleted the messages without finishing listening to them. Brittany also wrote. A long text, full of manipulation disguised as vulnerability. Patricia, I know we made mistakes. We all make mistakes. But abandoning us in the worst moment says a lot about who you really are. Lily asks for you. It hurts her not to see you. But I guess your pride is more important than your granddaughter. I read that message 3 times. I looked for every phrase designed to hurt, to generate guilt, to make me feel small and bad. Years ago it would have worked. I would have run crying to apologize, to give the money, to sacrifice myself again to prove I was good. But now I saw the manipulation. Clear, obvious, pathetic. I replied simply, Lily has always been welcome in my life. You decided to distance her. Don't project your decisions onto me. And no, it's not pride, it's dignity. Learn the difference. I blocked her number. I didn't need more messages. I didn't need more attempts to make me feel guilty for finally choosing myself. Moving day was approaching. I hired the small company. They came to pack the last of it. They looked at the marked boxes. Sure it's just this? Asked the foreman. I looked at everything I was leaving. Furniture, old appliances, memories that no longer served me. Sure, the rest stays. And what do we do with what stays? I thought for a moment. Donate it. To some family that needs it. Moving day arrived. It was Saturday. Gray. Cold. Perfect for closing chapters. The movers loaded quickly. I supervised with a coffee in hand. The woman who bought the apartment arrived early. She brought flowers. For your new home, she said, handing them to me. I smiled. How ironic. Farewell flowers that were actually welcome flowers. We signed the last papers. I handed her the keys. I hope you're very happy here, I told her. She smiled. I will be. This place has good energy. Good energy. Maybe now, after I cleared out all the accumulated sadness, all the unrequited sacrifice, all the accepted invisibility, I walked out of the building for the last time. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I just walked toward the moving truck. Forward, always forward. My new apartment was the complete opposite. Modern, bright, light flooring, white walls, huge windows, kitchen with new appliances, bathroom with a large shower, only 1 bedroom, perfect for me. Just for me. The movers unloaded everything in 2 hours. I tipped them generously. They left, and I was left alone in my new space, in my new life. I unpacked slowly. Everything found its place. Books on the new shelf, clothes in the closet, photos on the walls. But not the old photos, new ones, photos of landscapes I had bought online. Mountains, beaches, places I would soon visit. I hung the last one and stepped back. This was my space, my territory, my refuge. No one would enter here with demands, with expectations, with needs that I had to solve. This was my fortress, and the doors would only open for those who treated me with respect. That night, in my new bed, in my room, I did the math. Moving expenses and new furniture, $15,000. I had $170,000 left from the sale, plus the $95,000 I had saved. Total, $265,000. I invested $200,000 in a mixed fund, conservative but with growth. I would have $65,000 in backup, plus my pension of $1,200 a month. Enough. More than enough. Then I opened the travel site, that Machu Picchu tour I had saved. 15 days, $3,200, included flights, hotels, meals, guides. Departure in 6 weeks. There was space. I took a deep breath. And I bought it. Just like that. Without overthinking. Without asking permission. Without consulting anyone. $3,200 on my future. On my happiness. On me. The confirmation arrived in my email. Thank you for your purchase, Patricia. Your adventure begins soon. Adventure. What a beautiful word. 66 years old and finally I would have an adventure. Not the adventure of sacrifice. Not the adventure of raising a son alone. Not the adventure of surviving, but the adventure of living, of existing as a whole person, of discovering who Patricia was when no one needed anything from her. I printed the itinerary. I put it on the fridge with a magnet. Every day I would see it. Every day I would remember that my life had changed, that I had changed, that I would never be the last priority again. I went to bed. The mattress was firm, comfortable. The sheets smelled new. Everything smelled new, like possibility, like freedom. I closed my eyes, and for the second consecutive night, I slept in peace, without guilt, without fear, without that voice whispering that I was selfish, because I finally understood something. Taking care of myself wasn't selfishness. It was survival. It was justice. It was self-love after decades of misdirected love. Sunday I woke up late, almost 10. How long had it been since I slept in? I made breakfast calmly. Eggs, toast, strong coffee, orange juice. I sat in my small dining nook and ate slowly, looking out the window, watching the park below, people running, families walking, dogs playing, normal life, simple life, beautiful life. My phone, which I had turned back on, had 27 messages. I didn't read them. Not yet. I finished my breakfast, washed the dishes, got dressed, went out for a walk. I explored my new neighborhood. There was a bookstore on the corner, a coffee shop 2 blocks down, a fruit market on Saturdays, a park with walking paths, all new, all to discover. I went into the coffee shop, ordered another coffee, sat by the window. And there, in that place where no one knew me, where I wasn't anyone's mom or anyone's grandma, where I was just Patricia, I smiled. I smiled because finally, after so long, I was exactly where I needed to be. In first place, in my own life. 2 weeks of silence passed. 2 weeks where Matthew didn't call. Brittany didn't either. It was as if they finally understood I wouldn't change my mind. Or maybe they were looking for another solution, another person to use. I didn't care. I was busy building my new life. I signed up for pottery classes at the community center near my apartment. I always wanted to work with clay. I always postponed that desire because how was I going to spend time and money on something so frivolous when Matthew might need me? But now I had time, I had money, and I had permission. My own permission. The class was Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoon. There were 8 of us, all over 60, all with similar stories, absent children, dead partners, lives put on pause. The teacher's name was Sarah. She was 72, strong hands, kind smile. Clay doesn't judge, she said the first day. It only responds to your touch. It's honest. If you're tense, it breaks. If you're relaxed, it flows. I liked that philosophy. My first piece was a disaster, a deformed plate that cracked in the kiln. But I didn't care. I tried again. And again. By the 3rd class, I managed a small bowl. Imperfect, but mine. I painted it green. Hope green. New life green. I took it home and put it in my kitchen. There. Visible. A reminder that I could create things with my hands. That I didn't only exist to solve other people's problems. I also joined a book club. They met Wednesdays at night in the bookstore on the corner. We read 1 book a month, discussed, debated, drank wine and ate cheese. There were 10 women, all brilliant, all with strong opinions. I felt intimidated the first night. It had been so long since I had deep conversations, so long since I talked about ideas instead of obligations, but they welcomed me with warmth. Welcome, Patricia. What brings you to our group? I'm rebuilding my life, I said honestly. They nodded. They all understood without needing long explanations. The book that month was about a woman who left everything to live on an island. Fiction. But it felt real. Too real. When it was my turn to share opinions, I said, I think sometimes you need to lose everything to find yourself. A woman on the other side of the table, Susan, looked at me intensely. Did that happen to you? I hesitated. But something in the safe environment made me speak. Yes. A month ago, my son told me I would always be his last priority. I sold my apartment. I invested in myself. And when he asked me for $45,000 to save him from his bad decisions, I told him no. Silence, then applause. Slow at first, then louder. Bravo, Susan said. That takes courage. It wasn't courage, I admitted. It was survival. The best courage always is, she replied. That night I made friends. Real friends. Not acquaintances out of obligation. Chosen friends. My phone rang on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after the confrontation. Unknown number. I answered out of curiosity. Patricia. It was a woman's voice. Older. Yes. Who is this? It's Linda, Brittany's mother. Ah, the matriarch, the favorite grandma, the one who always had the place I never had. What do you need? I asked coldly. I need to speak with you about Matthew and Brittany. About what is happening. I know what is happening, I said. They told me. They made bad decisions. They have consequences. Linda sighed. Patricia, I know my daughter and your son have treated you poorly. I know, but they are young. They made mistakes. Are you really going to let them sink? Young. Matthew was 42, Brittany, 40. They weren't children. I'm not sinking them, I replied. They sank themselves. I just refused to jump in the water with them. Linda paused. Brittany told me you sold your apartment, that you have money invested. My money. My decision, I said firmly. Are you really going to be that selfish? There it was again. That word, selfish, the favorite weapon to control women. Linda, with all due respect, you don't know me. You don't know what I've sacrificed. You don't know how many times I made myself invisible so they could shine. You don't know how many birthdays I spent alone, how many tears I swallowed, how many times I was the last priority. So don't come calling me selfish for finally choosing myself. Silence on the other end. They could lose their house, she said finally, her voice softer, more real. I know. And I'm sorry. But that is not my responsibility. You already helped with $20,000. I contributed 40 years of sacrifice. I've given enough. What about Lily? She is innocent in all this. Lily has always been welcome in my life. But you all decided to distance her. You turned me into the grandma of last resort. Don't blame anyone else for that. Linda sighed deeply. Okay. I understand. Just wanted to try. She hung up. I stared at the phone. I felt something, not guilt, something softer. Pity. Pity for Matthew and Brittany, who really could lose everything. But pity wasn't enough to make me change my mind. Pity didn't pay for 40 years of being invisible. I put the phone away. I continued with my evening. I was reading the book for the group, a novel about reinvention, about women finding strength in the second half of their lives. I felt seen on every page. The next day, a text arrived from Matthew. I didn't expect it. Weeks of silence had passed, and I thought they had moved on. Mom, I need you to know something. We are going to lose the house. The bank starts foreclosure next week. Lily is going to have to change schools. Brittany is devastated. Hope you can sleep soundly knowing that. I read the message 3 times. I looked for guilt in my chest. I didn't find it. I found sadness. Sadness that things had reached this point, but not guilt. I replied after an hour. I am sorry you are going through this. Truly. But decisions have consequences. You decided to invest without a backup. You decided to risk your stability. I decided to protect mine. I hope this experience teaches you something valuable. He didn't reply. I didn't expect him to. I blocked his number too. Not out of anger, out of peace. Because every message was an attempt at manipulation, to make me feel responsible for his pain, and I no longer accepted responsibilities that weren't mine. My trip was approaching. 2 weeks. I bought new clothes, good backpack, walking shoes, camera, everything necessary. Susan from the book club was also going to Peru. Different tour, different dates, but we exchanged info, recommendations. We became friends fast. Nervous? She asked me, on a Wednesday after the group. A little, I admitted. I've never traveled alone. I've traveled alone 7 times, she said. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. You find yourself in ways you never imagine. How did you decide to start? I asked. Susan smiled sadly. My husband died. My kids moved far away. One day I saw myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman there, so I bought a ticket to Italy, alone. And I discovered I could be whole without being needed. Her words resonated. I could be whole without being needed. What a concept. What freedom. The night before my trip I slept little. Not from nerves. From excitement. My suitcase was ready. My passport. My itinerary. Everything perfect. I got up early, made coffee, sat on my balcony. The sun was just coming up, the city was waking up slowly, and me there, about to start an adventure that for decades I thought impossible. My phone rang. Private number, I answered. Patricia. It was Matthew. His voice sounded broken. What's wrong? I asked. Mom, I just wanted to tell you we lost the house. Officially, we're moving to a small apartment. Lily cries every night. Brittany barely speaks to me. And I just wanted you to know. Why are you calling to tell me that? I asked softly. Because I need you to understand what you caused. There it was. The final guilt, the desperate blow. Matthew, I said calmly. I didn't cause anything. You made decisions, bad decisions. And now you are living the consequences. That is not my fault. That is life. That is maturity. Something you should learn. You're my mother, he said. His voice trembled. Mothers are supposed to help. I helped for 40 years. I raised you alone. I gave you everything. And when I finally needed to be a priority, you told me I would always be last. Well, the last ones don't rescue. The last ones take care of themselves. Silence. Are you going to hang up like that? He asked. Yes, I said. Because tomorrow, I'm going on a trip. To Peru. 15 days. For me. And I'm not going to let your crisis ruin my peace. Trip? He sounded incredulous. You have money to travel, but not to help us. Exactly, I said without hesitation. Have a good trip, son. I hope when I get back you've learned something about responsibility. I hung up, turned off the phone, and got ready to leave. The airport was full. Families, couples, groups of friends, and me. Alone, with my small suitcase and my backpack. But I didn't feel alone. I felt free. Freedom has a different weight. Light, expansive. I checked in. Went through security. Waited at the gate watching people. Everyone was going somewhere. Everyone had stories. And no one knew mine. No one knew I had sold my apartment. That I had said no to my son. That I was remaking my life at 66. And that anonymity didn't hurt anymore. It was freedom. The flight left on time. I sat by the window. The plane took off. I saw my city getting small below. Everything I knew, everything I was, leaving it behind. And I felt something release in my chest. Something that had been tight for decades. Fear, obligation, guilt, all staying on the ground while I flew toward something new. We arrived in Lima after 6 hours. The heat hit me leaving the airport. Humid, intense, alive. The tour guide was waiting with a sign. Machu Picchu Group, Andean Adventure. There were 15 of us, most over 60, 3 couples, the rest solo, like me. We introduced ourselves on the bus to the hotel. A man sat next to me, tall, gray hair, kind smile. Robert, he said, extending his hand. Patricia, I replied. First time in Peru? He asked. First time traveling alone, I admitted. He smiled. Me too. Well, first time since I was widowed 3 years ago. There was something in his voice, something honest, something that invited speaking without masks. What brought you here? I asked. Robert looked out the window. My kids told me I should move on, stop living in the past, so I bought this trip to see if they might be right. And? Don't know yet. But the first step is being here. That's something. The hotel was modern, clean. My room overlooked a park. I unpacked slowly, hung my clothes, arranged my things. This room would be my home for 3 nights before leaving for Cusco. I showered, changed, went down to the welcome dinner. The guide, a young man named Luis, explained the itinerary. Tomorrow Lima, day after Cusco, then the Sacred Valley, and finally Machu Picchu. Each word sounded like a promise, like adventure, like life. I ate with Robert and 2 women from the group. We talked about everything, about our lives, about our children, about our losses. Robert had 2 daughters. They lived far away. They called him once a month. It's enough, he said. But his eyes said something else. One of the women, 68, told how her 3 sons had asked her to sell her house to distribute the inheritance while she was alive. I told them no, that my house was mine until I decided. They got mad, stopped talking to her for 6 months, Then they came back. But it wasn't the same. I listened to every story. I saw reflected parts of mine. Children who took, parents who gave, until there was nothing left to give. And then came the complaint, the accusation of selfishness, the abandonment disguised as disappointment. But here, at this table, in this foreign country, among strangers becoming friends, there was no judgment, only understanding. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no worries, just pure rest. Lima welcomed us with sun the next day. We visited the historic center, the Plaza de Armas, the cathedral, colonial palaces. Luis told us stories, conquest, resistance, reinvention. Peru has been destroyed and rebuilt many times, he said, but it always rises. It always finds a way to be new without forgetting the old. I liked that idea. Reinventing oneself without forgetting, without denying, just integrating and moving forward. We had ceviche for lunch. Fresh, spicy, delicious. Robert sat across from me. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Alive," I answered honestly. For the first time in a long time, alive. The flight to Cusco was short. The city welcomed us with mountain cold, thin air. Breathing took effort. Luis gave us coca tea. For the soroshi, he explained. Altitude sickness. The body needed to adapt. We spent the afternoon resting. I went out to walk alone. The streets were cobblestone, ancient, full of history. Women sold colorful textiles. Men played Andean music. Tourists walked amazed. And me among them, anonymous, free. I bought an alpaca shawl. Purple. I put it on. Felt the soft weight on my shoulders. Kept walking. Entered a small church. Candles lit. Sacred silence. I sat on a back bench. I'm not especially religious. But there was something in that space. Something that invited reflection. I closed my eyes. Thought about Matthew. About Lily. About Brittany. About everything I left behind. I felt sadness. But not guilt. Only sadness for what could have been and wasn't. For the family I imagined and never existed. I let go of that sadness. Released it like smoke. Rising. Disappearing. That night we had dinner as a group again. Robert looked for me. Sat next to me. We talked deeper. He told me about his wife. 40 years of marriage. Cancer. Fast. Devastating. I thought I would die with her, he admitted. The first few months, I wanted to die. What changed? I asked. One day my youngest daughter came. Found me in pajamas. Unshowered. The house a mess. And she said, "Dad, Mom wouldn't have wanted this. She would have wanted you to live." She was right. I told him my story. Summarized, but honest. Matthew, Brittany, the ultimatum, selling the apartment, the rejection, the trip. Robert listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You did the right thing," he said. "You think?" There was a part of me that still doubted. Completely. Children need to learn that parents are people too. With boundaries, with their own lives. If they don't learn, they become emotional vampires. Taking, never giving. Emotional vampires. What a perfect phrase. The Sacred Valley left us speechless. Green mountains, ancient ruins, impossible Inca terraces. Luis explained how the Incas built everything without modern technology. With knowledge, with effort, with vision, he said. We walked through Ollantaytambo, climbed stone stairs. The thin air made every step an effort. But I got to the top. I looked at the valley from above. Infinite, eternal, beautiful. Robert arrived behind me. "Worth it, right?" he asked between breaths. "Every step," I replied. That night at the hotel in Aguascalientes, the base town for Machu Picchu, I checked my phone. I had kept it off almost all week. I turned it on. 52 messages, most from Matthew, some from Brittany, 2 from unknown numbers. I didn't read them. I deleted them all without opening. Whatever they said didn't matter anymore. It had no power over me. I turned off the phone again, put it in my suitcase, and got ready for the most important day of the trip. Machu Picchu, the lost city. We left at 4 in the morning. Dark, cold, bus snaking up the mountain, 30 minutes of tight curves. We arrived when the sun was just starting to paint the sky. We entered, walked along stone paths, and then we saw it. Machu Picchu emerging from the mist. Mountains all around, clouds below. Absolute silence broken only by the wind. There are no words. There is no way to describe that moment. When something so big, so ancient, so beautiful, reminds you how small your problems are, how insignificant your pain is, compared to the eternity of the mountains. I cried, standing there in front of that wonder. I cried everything I didn't cry during the conflict, everything I kept in, everything I swallowed. I cried clean, I cried free. Robert was nearby. He didn't say anything, just put a hand on my shoulder. Silent solidarity, wordless understanding. We spent 4 hours there, walking, exploring, feeling. Luis told us stories about the Incas, about abandonment and rediscovery, about how sometimes the most valuable things get lost for centuries until someone finds them again. I felt found. I was Machu Picchu, lost for decades under the overgrowth of sacrifice, of service, of invisibility, and now rediscovered. By myself, for myself. At noon we started the descent. Tired, happy, whole. Robert walked beside me. "Patricia," he said suddenly. "Yes? I would like to keep getting to know you. After the trip. If you want." I looked at him. I saw a good man. An honest man. A man who was also reinventing himself. "I would like that," I replied. And I smiled. Because life, I discovered there in the mountains of Peru, always offers new beginnings. You just have to have the courage to take them. The trip ended too fast. 15 days that felt like minutes. The last day in Lima we exchanged numbers with the group. Hugs, promises to keep in touch. Robert and I stayed until the end. "When do you go back home?" he asked. "Day after tomorrow," I replied. "Me too. I live in the city, not so far from where you told me you bought your apartment." I smiled. What a coincidence. Or maybe not. Maybe the universe was finally conspiring in my favor. "I'd like to take you to dinner. When you're ready. No pressure," he said. His eyes were honest. No hidden agenda. No need disguised as politeness. Just genuine interest. "I would love that," I answered. "Give me a few days to land. Literally and emotionally." He laughed. "Take all the time you need." We said goodbye with a hug. Long, warm, full of possibility. The flight back was different from the way there. I was returning, but not to the same thing. I was returning to a new life, to a new apartment, to a new version of myself. We landed at night. The city shone below. My city, but I didn't feel small in it anymore. I took a cab home, my new home. I opened the door. Everything was as I left it. Clean, tidy, mine. I dropped the suitcase, threw myself on the sofa, and breathed. I had done something I never imagined possible. I had traveled alone. I had met wonderful people. I had cried at Machu Picchu. I had let go of decades of pain. And I had met a man who maybe, just maybe, could be something important. I didn't need him to be, but I was open to the possibility, and that openness was new. It was growth. It was life. The next day I unpacked slowly, washed clothes, organized photos on my computer, hundreds of photos, mountains, ruins, sunsets, selfies where you could see real happiness on my face, that happiness that comes from within, not from external validation, not from being needed, but from being whole. I turned on my phone. 112 messages, most from numbers I didn't recognize, some from Matthew, 3 from Brittany, 2 from Linda, 1 from Uncle Mark, all wanting something, all with urgencies. I deleted everything without reading. If it was really urgent, they would have found another way to contact me. I called Susan from the book club. "Patricia, how was it?" Her voice sounded excited. "Transformative?" I said honestly. "I need to tell you everything. Coffee tomorrow." Of course. At 10 at the usual place. We met at the coffee shop near my apartment. I told her everything. The trip, the ruins, the group, Robert. Susan listened with bright eyes. "Sounds perfect," she said. It was. It really was. "And what happened with your son?" she asked carefully. "I don't know. I deleted all his messages without reading." Susan nodded. And how do you feel about that? I thought before answering. At peace. For the first time in a long time. At peace. That's all that matters, she said. She told me about the book club, the new book they were going to read, the discussions I missed. Wednesday we meet. We expect you. I'll be there, I promised. And I meant it. This life, these friends, this space, it was mine. And I wasn't going to sacrifice it for anything. That afternoon the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. Matthew. My heart raced. Not from excitement, from alert. How did he know my address? Of course. Public records. The purchase of the apartment was public information. I took a deep breath. Opened the door. Matthew. My voice came out neutral. Mom. He looked bad. Tired. Thinner. Red eyes. How did you know where I live? I asked. I searched public records. I needed to see you. Why? I didn't invite him in. We stood in the doorway. Because I miss you? Because I need to talk to you? Because you're my mother and we can't go on like this? I felt something soften, but not enough. Matthew. I told you when you were ready to treat me like a priority, not like a bank, we could talk. I know. And you're right. You were right about everything. His words surprised me. I'm sorry. You were right. I treated you badly. Brittany treated you badly. We used you. We made you invisible. And when you finally set boundaries, we got mad instead of reflecting. I said nothing. Waited. We lost the house. We moved to a small apartment. Lily changed schools. Brittany and I almost got divorced. He paused. And in the middle of all that, I realized something. My whole life, you were always there. Always. And I never, not once, asked you what you needed. I never asked if you were okay, if you were happy, if you had dreams. I just assumed your dream was to serve me. And that was cruel. I felt tears wanting to come out. But I held them back. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I've been in therapy. Brittany and I, couples therapy, individual therapy. And my therapist asked me about you, about our relationship. And when I started talking, when I started listing everything you did for me and how little I did for you, I broke. I saw myself as what I was, a selfish son who took his mother's sacrifice as a given, as something deserved, and it wasn't. Matthew had tears in his eyes. Mom, I didn't come to ask for money. I didn't come to ask for favors. I came to ask for forgiveness. Genuine forgiveness. No expectations. No agenda. Just forgiveness. I looked at him. Really looked at him. I saw the boy I raised. The man he became. The son who hurt me. And the human being who seemed, finally, to be waking up. Matthew, I said softly, I appreciate you coming. I appreciate your words. But words are easy. Actions are what matter. I need to see real change. I need to see consistent effort. I can't go back to what we were just because you had a revelation in therapy. He nodded. I understand. I don't expect us to go back to how we were before. That before was toxic. For you. I know that now. And what do you expect? I asked. I expect to be able to start over. From zero. Know you as a person. Not as mom who fixes everything. But as Patricia. As a whole woman with her own life. Those words I never thought I'd hear. I need time, I said finally. Time to process this. To see if it's real or if it's desperation disguised as change. It's real, he said. But I understand you need to see it. I'll take all the time you need. He gave me an envelope. This is for you. Don't open it now. Open it when you're ready. I took the envelope. Thanks for coming, Matthew. For being honest. Thanks for listening. He left. Walked down the stairs slowly. I watched him go from my window. I closed the door. Stood there, holding the envelope, trembling slightly. This I didn't expect. I didn't expect a real apology. I didn't expect acknowledgement. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten. It started, Mom, Patricia, woman who gave me everything. I read it completely. 3 pages, detailing every memory, every sacrifice he remembered, every time I was invisible, Every time he should have valued me and didn't. It ended. I don't expect you to forgive me quickly. I only hope for the opportunity to show you I can be better. That I can be the son you always deserved. I love you, Matthew. I cried. I cried hard. I cried clean. Not from sadness, from liberation, from validation, from finally hearing the words I needed for decades. But I also cried knowing that words weren't enough. That I needed to see facts, real change, sustained effort. I couldn't go back to being the mom who solves everything. That woman died. Another was born. And this new Patricia had standards, had boundaries, had her own life. I saved the letter, put it in a drawer, didn't throw it away, kept it as evidence, as a starting point, as a possibility, but not as a solution. Robert called that night. "How was your day?" he asked. "Complicated. My son came over. I told him everything. The visit, the apology, the letter." Robert listened without interrupting. "What are you going to do?" he asked at the end. "Wait. Watch. Protect myself. And, in the meantime, keep living my life." "Seems wise to me," he said. "Are we still on for dinner?" "We're on," I confirmed. "This Saturday." "Perfect." We hung up. I got ready to sleep. In my bed. In my apartment. In my life. With possibilities open. With wounds healing. With a bright future. Matthew had taken the first step. Maybe genuine? Maybe not? Time would tell. But, meanwhile, I would keep being the priority in my own life. I would keep taking pottery classes, attending the book club, planning my next trip, getting to know Robert, building real friendships, finally living for me. Because after 66 years of being last on everyone's list, I had finally learned the most important lesson. You can't pour from an empty cup. First, you must fill yourself, and I, for the first time in my life, was full, whole, and happy. 6 months later, my life was unrecognizable, in the best sense possible. I woke up that Saturday with light coming through my window. No alarm, no urgencies, just the natural rhythm of my body telling me it was time. I stretched in my bed, smiled. Another day of mine. I made coffee, toast with jam, sat on my balcony, the morning routine I had perfected. No rush, no guilt, just present. My phone rang. "Robert, good morning, beautiful. Ready for today?" I smiled. We had been dating for 4 months. Slowly, no pressure. Two older people who knew real love doesn't need haste. "Ready." "What time are you picking me up?" "At 10. We're going to that craft market you wanted to visit." "Perfect. I'll wait for you here." We hung up. Robert was different. Attentive without being invasive. Interested without being needy. He asked me what I thought, what I felt, what I dreamed. And he really listened to the answers. Not to find how to use them, but to know me. To see me. What a revolutionary concept. My pottery class had advanced. I wasn't making deformed plates anymore. Now I made vases, large bowls, pieces I sold at the local market twice a month. Not for money, for the pride of creating something valuable with my hands. Sarah, my teacher, said I had natural talent. "You should consider doing this more seriously," she suggested last week. Maybe, maybe not. For now I just enjoyed the process. The book club had become essential. Every Wednesday. Without fail. This month we were reading about a woman climbing mountains in her 70s. Inspiring. Real. Susan and I had become close. We had lunch together twice a week. Talked about everything. About nothing. About life. She met Robert last month. "I approve," she said later. "He has good eyes. Honest eyes." I trusted her judgment. And mine. For the first time I trusted my own judgment about people. Matthew and I had established something new. It wasn't the mother-son relationship of before. It was something different. More balanced. More real. We saw each other once a month. For coffee. For conversation. No agendas. No needs. Just connection. The first time was awkward. We sat in a neutral coffee shop. Neither knew what to say. "How are you?" I answered honestly. "I'm glad." "You look different. More light." "I feel light," I admitted. "And you?" Matthew sighed. "Hard. Therapy is hard, but necessary. I'm learning a lot about myself. About us. About how I hurt the people I love. I nodded. That takes courage. You should have had that courage before. But you have it now. That counts. That first conversation lasted an hour. No tears, no drama. Just two adults talking honestly. The second time was easier. He told me about his work. He had gotten a new job. Better paid. More stable. Brittany was working too. Part-time. Things were improving slowly. Lily asks for you, he said carefully. My heart tightened. My granddaughter. I missed her. But I didn't show it. How is she? Adjusting. The new school is good. Smaller. She says she likes it better. I'm glad. Silence. Would you like to see her? Matthew asked. I considered carefully. When you are ready for her to see me as a real grandma, not as an emergency grandma. When Brittany is ready to share without resentment, then yes. Matthew nodded. I understand. We're working on that. In therapy, Brittany is learning too. Good, I said. And I meant it. Not for them. For Lily. She deserved healthy adults around her. The third meeting, Matthew brought something. A small box. This is yours. Always was yours. I opened it. Inside were my gold bracelets, the ones I sold when he was 15. Matthew. How? I searched for months. Found the jeweler who bought them from you. He sold them to a collector. I paid him double to get them back. They don't replace what you did. They don't even come close. But I want you to have them back. I touched the bracelets. Cold, heavy, full of memory. Tears filled my eyes. Matthew, you don't have to say anything. I just want you to know that I see your sacrifice. I finally see it, and I'm never going to forget it again. The bracelets were now in my jewelry box. I looked at them sometimes, not with sadness, with pride, for the woman I was, for the woman I am, for the entire journey traveled. Brittany wrote to me 2 weeks ago. A long message, apologizing, acknowledging her part. Patricia, I was terrible to you. I saw Matthew as a trophy I won and you as competition to eliminate. That was wrong, completely wrong. I don't expect immediate forgiveness. Just want you to know I'm working on being better. For Lily, for Matthew, for me. I replied after 3 days. I appreciate your message. I appreciate your honesty. I'm also working on being better. Maybe we can eventually find a way to coexist with mutual respect, she replied. I would like that. Very much. We weren't friends. Maybe we never would be. But maybe we could be civilized adults. That was enough. Lily called me a week ago. Matthew gave her my number. Grandma? Her voice sounded older. She was already 11. Lily, sweetie. How are you? Good, Grandma. Can I see you? I miss you. My heart melted. Of course, honey. When your parents say it's okay, we met yesterday, in a neutral park. Lily ran toward me. I hugged her tight. She had grown so much. I missed you, Grandma. Me too, sweetie. We spent 2 hours together. We talked. She told me about her new school, her friends, her art classes. Dad says you take pottery classes? She said. Yes, I love it. Can I go with you someday? I would love that. Matthew and Brittany watched from afar, without interfering. When it was time to leave, Lily hugged me again. Can I come to your new house? Soon, I promised. Very soon. Because now my terms also included space for her. But healthy space. Space where I wasn't the solution. Just the grandma, the person she loved. Without conditions, without sacrifices that emptied me. Robert and I went to the market as planned. Bought crafts, ate street food, walked holding hands. Happy? He asked. Very happy, I replied. That night, in my apartment, with Robert preparing dinner in my kitchen, I looked around. My space, my life, my choices. The pottery pieces on the shelf, the book club books on the table, the Machu Picchu photos on the wall, the itinerary for the next trip, to Colombia, on the fridge, all evidence of a life lived forward. A life where I was the protagonist, not the supporting character. Robert served dinner, pasta he cooked with care, wine he brought from his favorite shop. We sat down, toasted. What are we toasting to? He asked, smiling. To new beginnings, I said. To finding each other at the right time. To brave women who choose themselves, he added. We clinked glasses, drank, ate, laughed. And in that moment, surrounded by warmth and chosen company, I remembered the words I told Matthew 6 months ago, the words that changed everything. For 40 years I was last on your list, son. Now, finally, I am first on mine. Those words were my mantra, my reminder, my truth. Matthew had grown. He had changed. He was doing the work, and I was proud. But it was no longer my responsibility to fix him. It was no longer my job to ensure he was okay while I fell apart. Now we both had responsibilities, him with himself, me with myself. And maybe, just maybe, we could build something new, something healthy, something reciprocal. But if not, I would be fine. Because I learned the most important lesson at 66. I learned that it is never too late to choose yourself, never too late to set boundaries, never too late to say no, never too late to live the life you always deserved. I sold my apartment. I invested in myself. I traveled alone. I found new love. I recovered my granddaughter on healthy terms. I built real friendships, and finally, after decades of being invisible, I became visible. To me. And that, I discovered, was all I ever needed. Robert stayed that night. We talked late. About the future. About possibilities. About maybe moving in together eventually. No rush, with respect, with real love. When we finally fell asleep, his arm around me, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Safety. Not the safety of being needed, the safety of being valued, of being seen, of being first. And in the darkness of my room, in my chosen apartment, in my life built from scratch, I smiled. Because finally I understood what it meant to be whole. I didn't need Matthew to save me. I didn't need Robert to complete me. I was already complete. They just added to what already existed. And that difference, that small but huge difference, was everything. My son's family didn't come first anymore. I came first, in my own life, finally, eternally, gloriously, first.